Single dad saved a woman. From three attackers, her father's security team arrived with a contract. And that's when a broke night worker learned he didn't just save a stranger. He stepped into a trap so powerful and terrifying it could take his daughter from him forever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Daniel's shout echoed through the narrow alley, bouncing off brick walls and making the attackers pause. His heart hammered against his ribs as he charged forward, years of protective instinct taking over. The woman's terrified eyes met his, wide and desperate in the dim light from a flickering street lamp. "Get away from her!" Daniel's voice came out stronger than he felt, fueled by a surge of adrenaline. The three men turned to face him, their expressions shifting from surprise to menace. The largest one, wearing a dark hoodie, stepped forward while his companions maintained their grip on the woman. "Mind your own business, hero," the man growled, pulling something from his pocket that glinted in the weak light. Daniel's stomach dropped at the sight of the knife, but he couldn't back down now. Behind him, safely locked in the car, was Lily. He couldn't let her witness him walking away from someone in desperate need. What kind of example would that set? "I've already called the police," Daniel lied, keeping his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "They're on their way. You've got about 2 minutes to clear out." The woman whimpered as one of the men tightened his grip on her arm. Daniel could see tears streaming down her face, her business attire torn and dirty. She couldn't have been much older than 30. "He's bluffing," said one of the men holding the woman. "Nobody's coming." Daniel took another step forward, his hands raised to show he wasn't armed. "Look at me," he said, making eye contact with the man holding the knife. "Really look. Do I seem like someone who'd walk into this situation without backup? The cops are coming, that's a fact. What happens in the next minute is up to you." He spoke with a conviction he didn't feel, drawing on years of keeping calm for Lily's sake when bills piled up or troubles mounted. The same steady voice he used to reassure her that everything would be okay now served a different purpose. The man with the knife shifted his weight, uncertainty crossing his face. Daniel seized on that hesitation. "You've got time to disappear. Once those sirens start, that option's gone." Daniel took another careful step forward. "Make the smart choice." The leader's eyes darted toward the street, then back to Daniel. For a terrible moment, Daniel thought he would lunge forward with the knife. Instead, he cursed and backed away. "This ain't worth it," he muttered to his companions. "Come on." The other two men released the woman, who immediately crumpled to the ground. They backed away quickly, then turned and ran, their footsteps fading into the night. The leader gave Daniel one last threatening look before following his accomplices. Daniel waited until he couldn't hear them anymore before rushing to the woman's side. She had pushed herself up to sitting, her back against the rough brick wall, shoulders shaking with sobs. "Are you hurt?" Daniel asked gently, keeping a respectful distance. "I really should call the police now." "No!" The woman's voice was hoarse. "Please, no police. I need a minute." Daniel glanced back at his car, where he could see Lily's worried face pressed against the window. He needed to check on her, but he couldn't leave this woman alone. "I'm Daniel," he said softly. "My daughter's in the car. Would you feel safer if we drove you somewhere? Hospital, maybe?" The woman wiped her eyes with trembling hands. "Emily?" she managed. "My name's Emily. And no hospital, please. I'm not. They didn't." She took a shuddering breath. "They only got my purse and phone. I'm not hurt, just scared." "Dad," Lily's voice carried from the car, worried but strong. "Is everything okay?" "Stay in the car, sweetheart," Daniel called back, keeping his voice calm and reassuring. "We're helping someone who needs it." Emily looked toward the car, then back at Daniel, really seeing him for the first time. Her breathing was steadying, though her hands still shook. "You have your daughter with you, and you still stopped to help?" "I couldn't just drive by," Daniel said simply. He pulled out his own phone and offered it to her. "Would you like to call someone?" Emily accepted the phone with unsteady hands, but stared at it blankly. "I don't. I can't remember any numbers. They're all just stored in my phone." "Then let us drive you somewhere safe," Daniel offered. "Home, a friend's place, wherever you'd feel comfortable." Fresh tears welled in Emily's eyes. "I was heading to my car when she gestured vaguely toward the other end of the alley. "It's in the parking garage by Morton's." "We can take you there," Daniel said. He stood slowly and offered his hand to help her up. "Or anywhere else you need to go." Emily accepted his help, wincing slightly as she stood. Though she denied being hurt, Daniel noticed she favored her right leg. Her business suit was dirty and torn at one sleeve, and her carefully styled hair had come partially undone. "Thank you," she whispered, then looked toward the car again. "But your daughter. I don't want to frighten her." Daniel smiled gently. "Lily's tougher than you might think, and she'd want to help too." He gestured toward the car. "Shall we?" Emily nodded, and Daniel walked beside her to the car, staying close enough to steady her if needed, but maintaining a respectful distance. When they reached the car, he opened the back door for her. Lily turned in her seat, her face full of concern. "Are you okay?" she asked Emily immediately. "We have tissues in the glove compartment, Dad." "Thank you, sweetheart," Daniel said, reaching for the tissues and passing them back to Emily. The simple kindness brought fresh tears to Emily's eyes, but she managed a weak smile for Lily. "I'm okay," Emily said, accepting the tissues. "Your dad, he helped me when I really needed it." Lily beamed with pride. "That's what my dad does. He helps people." Daniel got back into the driver's seat, his heart rate finally beginning to return to normal. He'd acted on instinct, but now that the danger had passed, the reality of what could have happened hit him. He looked in the rearview mirror at Emily, who was dabbing at her eyes with the tissues. "The parking garage by Morton's?" he confirmed softly. Emily nodded, then hesitated. Would you mind waiting until I get my car started? Just to be sure." "Of course," Daniel said immediately. "We'll make sure you're safely on your way." As he pulled out of the alley, Daniel caught Lily's eye. She was watching him with a mixture of worry and admiration that made his throat tight. He hadn't wanted her to witness any of this, but maybe it wasn't the worst lesson for her to learn, that sometimes being brave meant being scared but helping anyway. The harsh sound of Daniel's footsteps echoed off the alley walls as he rushed forward. "Hey, stop right there!" His voice boomed through the narrow space, momentarily freezing the attackers in place. 3 men towered over a crumpled figure, their dark clothes blending with the shadows cast by the dumpsters. The largest of the 3 turned, his face partially hidden under a black baseball cap. "Walk away, man. This ain't your business." The threat in his voice was clear, but Daniel stood his ground, his protective instincts firing on all cylinders. "I'm making it my business," Daniel replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. He quickly assessed the situation, noting how the other 2 men flanked their leader. The woman on the ground whimpered, clutching her arms around herself. The leader took a menacing step forward. "Last warning, get lost." Daniel's mind raced through his options. He couldn't leave this woman to their mercy, but he also couldn't risk getting seriously hurt. Lily needed him. His eyes darted around the alley, spotting a metal trash can lid within reach. The first attacker lunged forward with a wild swing. Daniel sidestepped, grabbing the lid and bringing it up just in time to deflect a second punch. The metallic clang echoed through the alley. He pushed back hard, sending the man stumbling into his companions. "I've already called the police," Daniel lied loudly, his voice carrying down the alley. "They're on their way." He backed up slightly, positioning himself between the attackers and the woman while maintaining his defensive stance with the lid. The second man started forward, but the leader grabbed his arm. "Forget it! Let's go!" The threat of police involvement seemed to spook them. They backed away, throwing dark glances over their shoulders before disappearing. Around the corner, Daniel waited a few seconds, making sure they were truly gone before dropping the lid and turning to the woman. She was trembling violently, her designer clothes torn and dirty. "It's okay now," he said softly, crouching down to her level but maintaining enough distance not to crowd her. "You're safe. I'm Daniel." Her eyes, wide with fear and shock, met his. She tried to speak, but only managed a choked sob. Daniel noticed a nasty bruise forming on her cheekbone. "Take your time," he assured her gently. "Can you tell me your name?" She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. Emily. Emily Hale." Her hands shook as she tried to brush her tangled hair from her face. "Emily, I have my car just around the corner. Would you like me to take you to the hospital?" Daniel kept his voice calm and steady, the same tone he used when Lily had nightmares. Emily shook her head frantically. "No police," she managed to say. "Please, no police." Okay, Daniel soothed. "No police right now, but you should still get checked out. Will you let me help you up?" She nodded weakly. Daniel carefully helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as she swayed unsteadily. They made their way slowly to his car, where Lily was now awake and pressing her face against the window. As they approached, Lily unlocked the back door. Her young face was filled with concern. "Dad, is she okay?" "She will be, sweetheart," Daniel assured her as he helped Emily into the back seat. "This is Emily. She needs our help right now." Lily immediately turned in her seat to face Emily. "You can have my blanket," she offered, reaching for the soft purple throw she used during their night routes. "It always makes me feel better." A ghost of a smile flickered across Emily's face as she accepted the blanket with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel got back into the driver's seat and started the engine. "There's a good hospital about 10 minutes from here." The sudden flood of bright lights cut him off. Multiple beams illuminated the alley, turning night into day. The rumble of powerful engines filled the narrow space as 3 black SUVs squealed to a stop, effectively boxing in Daniel's sedan. Emily let out a small gasp of recognition. Car doors opened with precise synchronization. Dark-suited men emerged, their movements practiced and purposeful. Each one carried a weapon, held at the ready. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he watched the armed men take up positions around his car. Through the glare of headlights, he counted at least 6 of them, all wearing earpieces and moving with military precision. "Dad?" Lily's voice quivered slightly. "It's okay, sweetheart," Daniel said automatically, though his mind was racing. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Emily, who had pulled Lily's blanket tighter around herself, her face a mask of resignation and fear. The armed men maintained their positions, weapons at the ready, surrounding the car in a practice formation that left no angle uncovered. Their silence was more threatening than any shouted commands could have been. Daniel's protective instincts kicked in immediately. He pulled Lily close with one arm while positioning himself between Emily and the approaching figures. The armed men moved with practiced precision, their black tactical gear a stark contrast to the hospital's sterile white walls. Emily's small sigh of recognition made Daniel pause. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice still shaky. "They're my father's security team." The lead officer, a broad-shouldered man with close-cropped gray hair, lowered his weapon and spoke into his radio. "Package secured. Medical attention required." His stern expression softened slightly as he addressed Emily. "Miss Hale, are you all right? We've been searching the entire city." Emily nodded weakly, still trembling. "These people saved me," she gestured to Daniel and Lily. "The others, they ran when Daniel fought them off." 2 medics from the security team immediately began examining Emily's injuries while maintaining a professional distance. Daniel felt Lily squeeze his hand, her eyes wide as she watched the scene unfold. He gave her a reassuring smile, though his own mind was racing with questions. The lead officer turned to Daniel. "Mr. Carr?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. He reached into his tactical vest and pulled out a sealed manila envelope. "This is for you." Daniel accepted the envelope with furrowed brows. "How do you know my name?" "Our employer is very thorough," the officer replied matter-of-factly. "Please review the contents." Inside the envelope, Daniel found a thick contract, professionally bound with gold-embossed lettering. His name was printed in clear type on the first page, along with today's date. The title read, "Private Security Services Agreement." "There must be some mistake," Daniel said, flipping through the pages. "I'm just a delivery driver. I was only trying to help." The officer's expression remained neutral. "Our employer anticipated your response. He insists that everything is in order. The vetting process was completed several hours ago." Daniel's mind reeled. Several hours ago, he hadn't even met Emily yet. How could they have possibly? "Sir," one of the medics interrupted. "Miss Hale needs immediate medical attention. The hospital is ready for her arrival." Daniel helped Emily to her feet. She swayed slightly, clutching his arm. "Please," she said softly, "would you drive me there? I don't want to go with him." The security team exchanged glances but didn't object. The lead officer simply nodded. "We'll follow and secure the perimeter." The drive to the hospital was quick and quiet. Emily sat in the back seat, while Lily kept glancing over her shoulder with concern. 3 black SUVs maintained formation around Daniel's car, one in front, one behind, and one parallel. The contract sat heavy, in his jacket pocket, its presence raising more questions with each passing minute. At the hospital, the security team moved with military precision, establishing control points at every entrance. Medical staff had clearly been notified in advance. A team was waiting at the emergency entrance with a wheelchair for Emily. "This way, Miss Hale," a nurse said kindly, helping Emily into the chair. Before being wheeled away, Emily caught Daniel's hand. Please don't leave, she pleaded, her eyes reflecting both pain and fear. I know it's asking a lot, but please stay? Daniel looked down at Lily, who nodded encouragingly. We'll wait, he promised. The waiting room was eerily quiet, with security personnel positioned at every doorway. Lily curled up in one of the chairs, fighting sleep while Daniel paced, occasionally pulling out the contract to study it again. The terms were generous, incredibly generous, but the whole situation felt surreal. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes, the fluorescent lights above them flickered. A deep thrumming sound grew steadily louder, and Daniel could feel the vibrations through the floor. Lily sat up, suddenly alert. Dad, what's that noise? Before he could answer, one of the security officers spoke into his radio. Eagle has landed. Repeat, Eagle has landed. The thrumming grew louder still, and through the waiting room windows, Daniel could see the hospital's helipad illuminated by powerful spotlights. A sleek black helicopter touched down, its rotor spinning to a stop. Emily, who had just been wheeled back into the waiting room with her arm in a sling and butterfly bandages on her face, whispered something that made Daniel's spine tingle. My father is here. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. Daniel could feel the shift in the room's energy as security personnel straightened their postures and checked their earpieces. Emily's fingers gripped the armrests of her wheelchair, her knuckles white with tension. The hospital's fluorescent lights flickered again as the elevator doors opened. Richard Hale strode out, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. 4 more security guards flanked him, their earpieces glinting. His tailored suit and commanding presence drew immediate attention from the hospital staff, who seemed to shrink away as he passed. Daniel felt Lily press closer to his side in the waiting room chair. He wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders, watching as Richard approached Emily's room with the determination of a storm front. Emily. Richard's voice carried through the open door, more declaration than greeting. Are you hurt? I'm fine, Father. Emily replied, her voice smaller now. Just some bruises. The doctor says I can leave soon. Richard stepped into view, his tall frame filling the doorway. His steel gray hair and sharp features gave him an imposing presence that seemed to make the room smaller. His eyes swept over Emily, cataloging her injuries, before landing on Daniel and Lily. Mr. Carr, he said with a curt nod, I understand you intervened tonight. Before Daniel could respond, Emily spoke up. He saved my life, Father. Those men would have. She stopped, glancing at Lily. Richard's expression didn't change. Yes, well, we're grateful for your assistance. He turned back to Emily. This is exactly why you need proper security. These independent living arrangements of yours are no longer acceptable. Father, please, I've already handled it. Richard gestured to one of his guards, who produced the same contract Daniel had seen earlier. Mr. Carr has proven himself capable. More importantly, you trust him. He'll be your new personal security detail. Emily's face flushed. You can't just decide that. Daniel doesn't work for you. He has his own life, his daughter, all accounted for, Richard interrupted. The contract includes comprehensive benefits, housing, allowance, private schooling for his daughter. Everything has been arranged. Daniel stood up, still keeping Lily close. Mr. Hale, I appreciate the offer, but I need to decline. I'm not a security professional. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. You disabled 3 trained attackers without weapons. You showed judgment in a crisis. But most importantly, he glanced at Emily. My daughter, who has evaded every security team I've hired, actually allowed you to help her. That's because he's genuine, Emily said. He helped me because it was right, not because you paid him to. Exactly. Richard placed the contract on the small hospital table. That's why he's perfect for the job. Daniel shook his head. I'm sorry, but I can't accept. My life might seem simple to you, but it works for us. I need to focus on my daughter. Dad? Lily whispered, tugging his sleeve. Is Emily going to be okay? The question hung in the air, making Emily's eyes water and Richard's jaw tighten. Daniel knelt down to Lily's level. Emily has her father and his team to protect her. We need to let them do their job. The doctor entered then, breaking the tension. Miss Hale is cleared for discharge. The bruising will heal, but she should rest for a few days. Richard immediately began coordinating with his security team, speaking into a phone about safe houses and additional personnel. Emily caught Daniel's eye and mouthed thank you as nurses helped her into a wheelchair. "Let's go home, sweetheart," Daniel said to Lily, guiding her toward the exit. They walked through the quiet hospital corridors, past the vigilant security guards, and out into the cool night air. Neither spoke during the drive home, both processing the strange events of the evening. Their small duplex felt especially modest after the glimpse into the Hales world of private security and instant arrangements. Daniel helped a sleepy Lily change into her pajamas and tucked her into bed. "You did a good thing tonight, Dad," she said as he kissed her forehead. "Try to get some sleep, okay?" He smoothed her hair back and turned on her small nightlight. Daniel collapsed onto his own bed, fully clothed, exhaustion finally catching up with him. The evening felt surreal, like a movie scene he'd somehow wandered into. He drifted off thinking about Emily's frightened eyes and Richard's calculating stare. A soft thud jolted him awake hours later. Daniel lay still, listening intently. Another quiet sound came from the kitchen. He slipped out of bed, moving silently down the hallway. The kitchen was dark, but something felt wrong. The window above the sink was slightly ajar, though he distinctly remembered closing and locking it earlier. Heart pounding, Daniel flipped on the light. Nothing seemed immediately out of place, but as his eyes adjusted, he noticed small details. The dish towel was askew, a stack of mail had been shifted, and there, on the linoleum floor, were muddy footprints leading from the window to his living room and back. Someone had been in his home. Someone had searched his house while he and Lily slept. The realization sent ice through his veins as he quickly checked the rest of the small house. The intruder was gone, but the violation remained. In Lily's room, he found her still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger that had crept so close to her bed. Daniel stood in his kitchen, staring at those muddy footprints, knowing his simple life had just become much more complicated. The morning sun did little to warm Daniel as he dialed the police non-emergency number. He paced his small kitchen, studying the muddy footprints that still marked his linoleum floor. The dispatcher took his report with professional detachment, but Daniel could hear the skepticism in her voice when he described the break-in. "Nothing was taken?" she asked. "No, but someone definitely searched through, sir, without evidence of theft or significant property damage. The most we can do is file a report." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. He wanted to explain about Emily, the attack, and why someone might target him now, but the words sounded absurd even in his head. How could he explain that saving a billionaire's daughter might have put him in danger without sounding paranoid? "I understand," he said finally. "Thank you." That night, Daniel called his delivery service supervisor and requested time off, citing a family emergency. He couldn't risk leaving Lily alone, not after the break-in. They pulled out the sofa bed and had an impromptu movie night, but Daniel noticed how Lily kept glancing at the windows, how she startled at every car passing outside. "Dad," she whispered as he tucked her in, "are the bad men going to come back?" Daniel's heart clenched. "No, sweetheart, I won't let anyone hurt you. Ever." The next morning, they left early for school. Lily clutched Daniel's hand tighter than usual as they walked down their street. The nanas fented. The neighborhood looked different now. Every shadow seemed deeper, every rustle more suspicious. A black SUV rolled slowly alongside them, its tinted windows reflecting the morning light. Daniel's pulse quickened. He pulled Lily closer, ready to run, when the rear window lowered. "Mr. Carr." A familiar face appeared, one of Richard's security team from the hospital. "We need to talk." Two men stepped out of the vehicle. They wore casual clothes instead of suits now, but Daniel recognized their alert postures, the way their eyes constantly scanned the surroundings. "This isn't a good time," Daniel said, nodding toward Lily. "Sir," the taller guard spoke quietly, "the men who attacked Miss Hale, we don't believe it was random. And given your involvement, we have concerns for your safety." Daniel looked down at Lily, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. "Let me get my daughter to school first." The guards nodded. "We'll wait." The walk to school felt endless. Daniel hugged Lily extra tight at the gate, watching until she disappeared inside the building. Only then did he turn back to the waiting SUV. The drive to the Hale estate passed in tense silence. Daniel watched the neighborhoods grow increasingly affluent until they turned through elaborate iron gates onto a long, tree-lined driveway. The mansion that emerged seemed to belong in a different world than his modest duplex. They led him through a side entrance to what appeared to be a private meeting room. Dark wood paneling and leather chairs surrounded a massive desk where Richard Hale sat reviewing documents. He looked up as Daniel entered, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Carr, please, sit." Daniel remained standing. "You have answers for me?" Richard nodded to his security team, who closed the door as they left. He opened a folder and spread several photographs across the desk. These were taken 2 weeks ago. Different city, different attackers, but the same pattern. Daniel leaned forward. The surveillance photos showed Emily being followed by different men, their faces clear enough to see they weren't the same ones from the alley. "There have been 3 attempts to get to Emily in the past year," Richard continued. "Each time, different men, but working for the same organization. We believe they're after leverage against me or my company. Emily's determination to live independently has made their job easier. Why hasn't this been reported to the police? We have evidence linking these incidents to corporate espionage and international players. Local law enforcement would only complicate matters." Richard's jaw tightened, and publicity would only make Emily a more visible target. Daniel studied the photos, his protective instincts warring with his desire to keep Lily safe and uninvolved. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because your intervention the other night proved something." Richard stood, walking to a window that overlooked manicured gardens. "My security team is highly trained, well-equipped, and completely ineffective at protecting my daughter. Do you know why?" Daniel waited. "Because Emily actively evades them. She sees them as extensions of my control, not protection." Richard turned back to face Daniel. "But you she trusts. When I arrived at the hospital, do you know what she said to me? She said if I insisted on having someone guard her, she would only accept you." The weight of the situation settled over Daniel. Emily's life was genuinely in danger, and she had specifically asked for him. But taking the job would mean entering a world of wealth, power, and danger. Everything he had always tried to protect Lily from. Richard must have read his hesitation. "I understand your reluctance, Mr. Carr. You have your daughter to consider, but I'm offering you the means to protect both our daughters. The salary would allow you to move to a safer neighborhood, provide better opportunities for Lily, and ensure her security while you—" Daniel looked down at the photos again, seeing Emily's vulnerable face in each one. He thought of her trembling in his arms in the alley, of her quiet strength in the hospital, of how Lily had immediately wanted to comfort her. "I need to think about it," he said finally. "Of course." Richard gathered the photos. "But please don't take too long. Emily's safety depends on your decision." Daniel sat in the plush leather chair, his calloused hands clasped tightly in his lap. The meeting room in the Hale estate felt worlds away from his modest duplex. Tall windows stretched from floor to ceiling, framed by heavy burgundy drapes that probably cost more than his annual rent. The polished mahogany table between him and Richard Hale gleamed under recessed lighting. "I understand your hesitation," Richard said, his voice carrying the practiced patience of someone used to getting his way. "But consider what's at stake here." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. The security contract lay before him, its pages thick with legal terminology he barely understood. The salary figure made his head spin, more money than he'd ever dreamed of making. But money wasn't the issue. "Mr. Hale, I appreciate the offer, but my daughter." The door opened quietly, and Emily stepped in. Her bruises had faded to yellowish shadows, but something in her eyes still carried the weight of that night in the alley. She moved carefully to a chair, offering Daniel a small smile. "I wanted to thank you again," she said softly. "Not just for saving me, but for being kind, for making me feel safe when I was terrified." Daniel nodded, his throat tight. Anyone would have helped. "No," Emily shook her head. "They wouldn't have, and they didn't." She glanced at her father before continuing. "I know this situation is crazy. I never wanted to drag anyone else into my mess." Her fingers traced invisible patterns on the table's surface. "I tried so hard to live a normal life, away from all this. I got an apartment, took the bus, made regular friends. But the threats followed." Richard's jaw tightened, which is exactly why— "Dad, please." Emily's voice carried a lifetime of friction. "Let me explain." She turned back to Daniel. "My father and we see the world differently. He believes absolute control equals absolute safety. I believe there has to be room to breathe, to live." Her eyes grew distant. "But maybe we're both wrong. The people targeting me, they're organized, patient. They've gotten close before." Daniel thought of the muddy footprints in his kitchen, of Lily's frightened eyes. "Why you?" "Money, primarily," Richard answered. "Emily's security team has intercepted 3 kidnapping attempts in the past 2 years. each one more sophisticated than the last. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. I thought if I lived simply, quietly, they'd lose interest. Instead, I just made myself an easier target. She met Daniel's gaze. I'm sorry they came to your home. That was never supposed to happen. Richard stood, straightening his jacket with practiced precision. Which brings us to our current situation. He placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. Mr. Carr, I'm offering you a clear choice. Sign the contract, move to the estate with your daughter, and help protect Emily. Or walk away and hope those footprints in your kitchen were a one-time occurrence. Dad, Emily protested. No, Emily. He needs to understand the reality. Richard's eyes locked onto Daniel's. These people don't leave loose ends. Daniel's mouth went dry. He thought of Lily sleeping in their apartment, vulnerable. I need time to think, to talk to my daughter. Richard nodded once. You have until tomorrow morning. The estate's security team will watch your home tonight, but after that, he let the implications hang in the air. That evening, Daniel stirred a pot of mac and cheese, Lily's favorite comfort food. She sat at their small kitchen table, swinging her legs and watching him with those perceptive eyes that sometimes made him forget she was only 10. Baby, we need to talk about something important, he said, setting a bowl in front of her. Is it about the rich girl you helped and the bad men? Daniel sat down beside her. Yes. Her name is Emily, and she's in trouble. Some people want to hurt her. Lily's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Like the men in the alley? Yes, like them. Daniel took a deep breath. Emily's father offered me a job to help keep her safe, but we'd have to move to their house. Leave our home? Lily's voice quavered. I think, Daniel chose his words carefully, I think it might not be safe here anymore. The people who want to hurt Emily, they know where we live now. Lily set down her fork, her small face serious. Because you helped her? Yes, but helping people is good. You always say that. Daniel felt his eyes burn. It is good, baby, but sometimes doing good things can be complicated. Lily was quiet for a long moment, pushing her macaroni around the bowl. Would I still go to my school? No, you'd need to change schools, but it would be a really good school. Would we have our own room? We'd have our own rooms, plural, and a bathroom just for us. Lily's eyes widened slightly at that luxury. Then she asked the question that mattered most. Would you be safe? Daniel's heart squeezed. Leave it to his daughter to worry about him first. I think we'd both be safer there, with all the security they have. Then I think we should go. Lily nodded decisively. You always protect me, Dad? Maybe now you can protect Emily too. Daniel pulled her into a tight hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. When did you get so wise, huh? Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with the contract. The muddy footprints had been cleaned away, but he could still see them in his mind. He read through each page carefully, understanding that each signature was another step away from their simple life. The estate would provide housing, security, education for Lily, health insurance, things he'd struggled to provide on his own. But more importantly, it offered safety, protection from whoever had searched his home, from whoever might return. Daniel picked up his pen. In the quiet of his kitchen, with his daughter sleeping down the hall, he began to sign. Daniel and Lily stood in their small duplex's living room at dawn, surrounded by cardboard boxes and memories. The morning light filtered through threadbare curtains, casting long shadows across their few possessions. Lily clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, watching as Daniel sealed the last box with packing tape. Ready, sweetheart? Daniel asked, forcing cheerfulness into his voice. Lily nodded, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Will we have our own rooms there? That's what they promised. Daniel ruffled her hair gently. Right on schedule, 2 black SUVs pulled up outside. The security team worked efficiently, loading their belongings with military precision. Daniel locked the duplex door one last time, holding Lily's hand as they walked to the waiting vehicle. The drive to the Hale estate took 20 minutes. Lily pressed her face against the window as they passed through the imposing iron gates, following a winding driveway past manicured gardens and fountains. Their new home, a modest guest house tucked behind a grove of maple trees, looked cozy despite its pristine condition. This way, Mr. Carr, one of the security team members gestured. They helped carry boxes inside, where Daniel discovered their few belongings looked almost lost in the fully furnished space. The kitchen gleamed with new appliances, and both bedrooms had fresh linens on comfortable beds. A stern-faced woman in a crisp uniform appeared at their door. "I'm Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper. Welcome to the estate." She handed Daniel a thick folder. "These are the standard procedures, emergency protocols, and estate maps. Your security orientation begins in 1 hour." Before Daniel could respond, Emily appeared behind Mrs. Henderson. She wore casual clothes, jeans, and a soft sweater that somehow made her look younger than before. "I hope you're settling in okay," Emily said, smiling warmly at Lily. "I brought something for your room." She held out a wrapped package. Lily looked at Daniel for permission before accepting it. Inside was a set of professional art supplies, colored pencils, sketching pads, and watercolors. "Dad said you like to draw," Emily explained. "I do too. Maybe we could draw together sometime?" Lily's face lit up. "Really? I'd love that." Daniel watched their interaction, noting how Emily's shoulders relaxed as she chatted with Lily. The tension she usually carried seemed to ease slightly. A sharp knock interrupted them. The security chief stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Time for orientation, car." The next few hours passed in a blur of information. Daniel received an earpiece, an encrypted phone, and detailed briefings on Emily's schedule, known threats, and emergency procedures. The security chief's attitude remained cool and professional, though Daniel sensed an underlying resentment. "Miss Hale has a habit of creative exits," the chief explained, pointing to various spots on the estate map. "Your job is prevention, not pursuit. Clear?" Daniel nodded, memorizing the layout. "What about the recent threats? Any leads?" The chief's jaw tightened. "That's being handled by a separate team. Focus on your assignment." As evening approached, Daniel took advantage of the fading light to walk the estate's perimeter. The grounds were extensive, with several potential weak points despite the sophisticated security system. He noted camera positions, guard rotations, and access points, his protective instincts already mapping escape routes and safe zones. The sun was setting when he returned to the guest house. Warm laughter drew him around to the back porch, where he found Lily and Emily sitting cross-legged on cushions, sketching pads balanced on their knees. Emily was showing Lily how to shade properly, their heads bent together over the paper. "Look, Dad." Lily held up her drawing, a surprisingly good portrait of their new home. "Emily taught me about perspective." Emily blushed slightly. "She's a natural. I never had anyone to draw with before." Daniel leaned against the porch railing, watching them. The scene felt surreal. His daughter and this wealthy young woman bonding over art supplies on a multi-million-dollar estate. Yet there was something genuine in Emily's smile, something healing in the simple act of creating art with a child who didn't care about her last name. "It's getting dark," Daniel said gently. "Time to head in, Lily." Emily gathered her supplies, hesitating. "Thank you, Daniel, for agreeing to this. I know it's not ideal, but—" She glanced at Lily, who was carefully putting away her new art supplies. "It's nice not feeling alone." Daniel nodded, understanding more than he could express. As Emily walked back to the main house, he activated his earpiece and followed at a discreet distance. His first official shift as her protector was beginning, but something told him this job would involve guarding more than just her physical safety. The night settled over the estate, security lights casting soft glows across the manicured lawns. Daniel watched Emily enter her wing of the mansion, checking windows and sightlines. He settled into his new role, a father and protector in a world he never expected to enter, but one where perhaps both he and Lily might find an unexpected home. Daniel's first full day as Emily's personal security began at sunrise. He stood in the grand dining room, positioned discreetly behind Emily's chair as she picked at her breakfast. The morning light streamed through, floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the tension between father and daughter. Richard Hale sat at the head of the massive oak table, scanning reports on his tablet while occasionally glancing at Emily. "The board meeting is next week. I expect you'll attend?" Emily's fork clinked against her plate. "I have my art therapy sessions with the veterans that day." "Emily?" Richard's tone carried a warning. "The company needs to see you taking an interest in your future responsibilities. The veterans need me more than the board does, Father." Emily's voice was quiet but firm. Daniel observed their interaction, noting how Emily's shoulders tensed with each exchange. The dining room's grandeur, with its crystal chandelier and antique paintings, seemed to amplify the emotional distance between them. After breakfast, Daniel drove Emily to her private therapy session in a wing of the estate specifically renovated for medical purposes. He waited outside the door, monitoring the hallway, while reflecting on the morning's dynamics. When Emily emerged an hour later, her eyes were red, but her stance was steadier. She managed a small smile at Daniel. "Would you mind walking with me through the gardens? I need some fresh air before preparing for tomorrow's art classes." They strolled past meticulously maintained flower beds and decorative fountains. Emily led them to a secluded bench beneath a weeping willow, its branches creating a natural curtain of privacy. "I'm sorry about breakfast," Emily said, watching leaves dance in the breeze. "It's always like that with him." Daniel kept his voice gentle. "Family relationships can be complicated." "Was it different with your wife?" Emily asked, then quickly added, "I'm sorry if that's too personal." Daniel's throat tightened slightly. "Sarah and I, we had our moments. But there was always love, even in disagreement." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "She got sick when Lily was 5. I worked 3 jobs, trying to cover the son, medical bills, but it wasn't enough. She made me promise to take care of Lily, to make sure she grew up knowing she was loved." Emily listened intently, her own troubles momentarily forgotten. "You've done an amazing job with her. Lily is such a bright, caring child." "Some days are harder than others," Daniel admitted, balancing work and being there for her. "It's like walking a tightrope sometimes." They continued walking, passing the estate's greenhouse, where staff prepared for spring planting. Emily shared stories about her own childhood, lonely holidays in massive houses, gifts without warmth, protection that felt like imprisonment. "After my mother died, Father became obsessed with keeping me safe," she explained. "Every friend was a potential threat, every outing a risk assessment. I started sneaking out just to feel normal." Daniel thought about the security briefing he'd received. "That's what triggered his recent concerns?" Emily nodded. "I rented a small apartment downtown, tried to build a live teaching art to veterans. Father couldn't handle losing control." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Maybe he was right to worry after what happened in the alley." "Being careful doesn't mean you have to stop living," Daniel said firmly. They spent the afternoon in Emily's studio, where she prepared materials for her upcoming classes. Daniel watched her transform as she worked, anxiety melting away as she organized supplies and reviewed lesson plans. Her passion for helping others through art was evident in every careful preparation. As evening approached, Daniel attended his first formal security briefing in the estate's control center. Multiple screens displayed camera feeds from around the property, while analysts monitored communications and threat assessments. The security chief's presentation was thorough, but carried an undertone of resentment. "Ms. Hale's independent activities created multiple blind spots in our protection protocols. She disabled tracking devices, avoided scheduled check-ins, and maintained unauthorized relationships with individuals outside our vetted circles." Daniel studied the incident reports, seeing them through new eyes after his conversations with Emily. What security saw as defiance, he recognized as desperate attempts at autonomy. "Our primary concern remains the organized nature of recent threats," the chief continued. "Ms. Hale's public art therapy work has made her movements predictable to hostile parties." The briefing concluded with updated patrol schedules and communication protocols. Daniel's head spun with codes and contingencies, but his resolve remained clear. Emily needed protection that wouldn't suffocate her spirit. Walking Emily back to her room that night, Daniel noticed how the mansion's grandeur seemed to weigh on her. Their footsteps echoed through marble hallways lined with priceless art, every surface gleaming with wealth and isolation. "Thank you," Emily said softly, as they reached her door. "For listening today, for understanding." Daniel nodded, maintaining professional distance while letting warmth show in his voice. "Get some rest, Miss Hale. Tomorrow's another day." He waited until he heard the locks engage, then completed his security checks before heading back to the guest house. The evening air carried the scent of jasmine from the gardens, and lights glowed warmly from the windows where Lily waited. Exhaustion settled into his bones as he climbed the steps to their temporary home. Today had revealed the true complexity of his role, not just guarding Emily's physical safety, but somehow helping her navigate the invisible walls that imprisoned her heart. The next morning, Daniel woke before dawn, the unfamiliar shadows of the guest house slowly taking shape as his eyes adjusted. He moved quietly through the kitchen, not wanting to wake Lily just yet. The coffee maker hummed to life as he prepared her favorite breakfast, French toast, with cinnamon. "Dad?" Lily's sleepy voice called from her bedroom. "In the kitchen, sweetheart. Time to get ready for school." She emerged in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. Daniel smiled, remembering how they used to rush through mornings in their old place. Here, at least, they had space and time to breathe. After breakfast, Daniel walked Lily to the waiting car where Thompson, one of the estate drivers, greeted them with a friendly nod. "Ready for another day, Miss Lily?" "Yes, Mr. Thompson." Lily gave her father a quick hug before climbing in. Daniel watched until the car disappeared through the estate gates. As he turned back toward the main house, he saw Emily standing on the front steps, wearing a casual sweater and jeans instead of her usual formal attire. "Good morning, Daniel," she said, offering a tentative smile. "I hope you don't mind, but I have a favor to ask. I volunteer at the Oak Ridge Senior Community Center on Thursdays. Would you be willing to accompany me there today?" Daniel nodded. "Of course, that's what I'm here for." The drive to the center took 20 minutes. Emily sat quietly in the back seat, sorting through an art supplies bag. When they arrived, Daniel was surprised by the warmth of the welcome Emily received. "Emily, dear," an elderly woman in a wheelchair beamed. "We missed you last week." "Hi, Mrs. Patterson." Emily knelt down to hug her. "I brought some new watercolors today." Daniel watched as Emily set up an art therapy session in a sunny room filled with veterans. Her entire demeanor changed here, more confident, more at peace. She moved from table to table, offering gentle encouragement and genuine interest in each person's work. "She's something special, isn't she?" A veteran with silver hair commented to Daniel. "Makes us old-timers feel like Picasso." Daniel smiled, but his attention was drawn to movement outside the window. A figure seemed to be watching from near the parking lot, but when he looked more carefully, they were gone. He made a mental note while maintaining his calm exterior. Emily spent 2 hours with the seniors, her face glowing with purpose. As they prepared to leave, several veterans hugged her goodbye. Daniel noticed how naturally she connected with them, how her usual anxiety seemed to disappear in their presence. During the drive back, Emily spoke more openly than she had before. "Thank you for coming today. I know it might seem silly. Art therapy with seniors." "It's not silly at all," Daniel assured her. "I saw how much they appreciate you." Back at the estate, Daniel immediately sought out the security office. The chief, a stern-faced man named Marshall, listened to his report about the figure at the center. "We had no unauthorized personnel logged in that area," Marshall said dismissively. "Probably just a visitor to the center." Daniel felt uneasy about Marshall's casual response, but kept his concerns to himself. That evening, dinner became another battleground between Emily and her father. The elegant dining room felt too large for just the three of them, with Richard at one end and Emily at the other, Daniel standing watch nearby. "I won't cancel my classes," Emily said firmly, her fork untouched beside her plate. "The veterans depend on me." Richard set down his wine glass harder than necessary. "This isn't about the veterans, Emily. It's about your safety." "After what happened last week?" "What happened last week is exactly why I need to keep living my life. I won't be a prisoner in my own home." Daniel saw Richard's jaw tighten. Before the argument could escalate, he stepped forward. "Sir, if I may suggest, we could implement additional security measures for Emily's volunteer work. Pre-screening locations, advanced teams, varying travel routes. There are ways to maintain safety without restricting activity entirely." Both Hales turned to look at him, Emily with gratitude, Richard with surprise and mild irritation. "We'll discuss this later," Richard said finally, returning to his meal. After dinner, Daniel conducted his usual perimeter check of the estate grounds. The evening air was cool, and his flashlight beam cut through gathering shadows. Near the side gate, something caught his attention: fresh footprints in the soft earth. Different from the standard security boot treads he'd grown familiar with. Daniel crouched to examine them more closely. They led toward the gate, but not away from it, as if someone had approached and then disappeared. He took photos with his phone and immediately contacted the security office. "Marshall, this is Carr. I found suspicious footprints near the east side gate. Request increased surveillance and a full review of today's security footage." The radio crackled with Marshall's response, still carrying that dismissive tone. "Understood. I'll look into it." Daniel stood in the growing darkness, studying the prints one last time. His instincts, honed by years of Blyla's protecting Lily, told him something wasn't right. Whether it was the mysterious figure at the community center or these fresh footprints, patterns were emerging that he couldn't ignore. He completed his round and made detailed notes in the security log, ensuring there would be a record of his concerns regardless of Marshall's response. As he walked back to the guest house, he saw Emily's light still on in the main house, a solitary window glowing in the darkness. He understood her desire for freedom, but he also understood the very real dangers that had brought him here in the first place. After watching Lily's car disappear down the winding driveway, Daniel turned to find Emily waiting on the main house steps. She wore a simple blue sweater and jeans, her blonde hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Good morning," she said, offering a gentle smile. "I was hoping you'd join me at the senior center today. I teach art therapy there twice a week." Daniel nodded, checking his mark, communication device. "Of course. Let me coordinate with the security team." At the senior center, Daniel watched Emily work with remarkable patience. She moved from table to table, helping elderly veterans mix watercolors and sketch landscapes. Her genuine warmth drew out even the most reserved participants. "She's an angel, that one," whispered Mr. Martinez, a Vietnam veteran working on a mountain scene. "Comes here regular as clockwork, never treats us like we're broken." Daniel stood near the wall, scanning the room out of habit. A flash of movement caught his eye. Something outside the window. He stepped closer but saw only empty parking spaces. Back at the estate, Daniel immediately requested security footage review. The chief's office was stark and impersonal, with multiple monitors displaying various camera feeds. "Nothing unusual in the footage," the chief said dismissively, barely glancing at the screens. "Probably just a bird." Daniel frowned. "Could we check the angles?" "Again? I'm certain I saw movement." "Listen, Carr," the chief leaned back, his chair creaking. "You're new here. Don't try to teach us our jobs." Something in the man's tone set off warning bells in Daniel's mind. He left the office more unsettled than when he'd entered. Later that afternoon, Emily found Daniel in the garden. She sat beside him on a stone bench, her shoulders tense. "You seem troubled," Daniel observed quietly. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. "I saw you talking to the security chief. He's not what he seems." "What do you mean?" "My father's business." She hesitated. "It's not all clean deals and handshakes. Some people were hurt along the way, pushed out of their companies, lost everything." Her voice dropped lower. "And some of those people made threats." Daniel listened intently as Emily continued. "The security chief. He was hired after one particularly nasty corporate takeover. I've never trusted him, but father won't hear anything against his staff." Their conversation was interrupted by Lily's excited voice calling from the path. She ran toward them, backpack bouncing, waving a piece of paper. "Emily, look what we're doing in art class." Lily thrust the paper forward, a detailed assignment about color theory and composition. Emily's face lit up as she examined the paper. "This is wonderful, Lily. Would you like some help with it tomorrow?" "Really?" Lily beamed. "Could you teach me about shading like you were showing the veterans?" "Of course," Emily smiled warmly. "We can work on it after your homework." After dinner, Daniel began his nightly security check. He pulled up the estate blueprints on his tablet, studying the layout methodically. In the northwest corner, something caught his attention, a maintenance tunnel, apparently unused, running beneath that section of the grounds. He cross-referenced it with the camera placement map. The tunnel had no surveillance coverage. Daniel immediately reported his finding to the Combest security office. The chief barely looked up from his phone. "That tunnel's been sealed for years," he said flatly. "No need to waste resources there." "It should at least have a camera," Daniel insisted. "I said it's not a priority." The chief's tone left no room for discussion. Daniel waited until the night shift changed before making his way to the tunnel entrance. He clicked on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. The sealed entrance was anything but. The old padlock was clearly functional, showing recent signs of use. The beam of light revealed footprints in the dust, fresh ones. Someone had been here, and recently. Inside the maintenance tunnel, Daniel's flashlight beam cut through decades of dust and cobwebs. The air was thick and musty, carrying the scent of dampness and decay. His footsteps echoed against the concrete walls as he moved deeper into the passage. About 50 feet in, something caught his eye. Fresh scuff marks marred the dusty floor, creating clear paths through years of accumulated grime. Daniel crouched down, examining the disturbed area more closely. A black leather glove lay partially hidden behind a fallen chunk of concrete. He picked it up carefully, noting its high quality and relatively new condition. "This shouldn't be here," he muttered, pocketing the glove as evidence. Moving further along, he found more signs of recent activity, fresh cigarette butts, modern candy wrappers, and distinct footprints in the softer patches of dirt. Someone had definitely been using this tunnel, and recently. Daniel retraced his steps quickly and headed straight for Richard's study. The security team might have dismissed his concerns, but this evidence couldn't be ignored. He knocked firmly on the heavy wooden door. "Come in," Richard's voice commanded. Daniel entered to find Richard behind his massive desk, reading through documents. "Sir, I need to show you something urgent." He placed the glove on the desk and described what he'd found in the tunnel. Richard's face darkened as he examined the glove. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Get the security chief in here, now." Within minutes, the chief arrived, looking annoyed at the summons. His expression changed quickly when Richard held up the glove. "Explain this," Richard demanded. "Why was a security concern dismissed when it was first reported?" The chief stammered, his usual arrogance deflating under Richard's stern gaze. Richard ordered the tunnel sealed immediately, with additional cameras and motion sensors to be installed. When Emily learned about the tunnel, her face went pale. She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture Daniel had come to recognize as self-protection. "They've been that close all this time?" Her voice quavered. "Hey," Daniel said gently, "you're safe. I promise you that. Would you like to get some fresh air? The gardens are secure." Emily nodded, gratefully, and they made their way outside. The estate gardens were beautiful, filled with late summer blooms and carefully tended paths. They walked in comfortable silence until Emily spoke. "You know what's strange?" she said, stopping beside a rose bush. "I've lived here my whole life, surrounded by security, but I've never felt as safe as I do with you watching over me." She touched a pink rose petal delicately. "You actually see me as a person, not just something valuable to protect." Daniel considered her words carefully. Sometimes the best protection comes from understanding what someone really needs, not just building walls around them. Emily smiled sadly. "I wish my father understood that." Later that evening, Daniel sat across from Lily at their small dining table in the guest house. He'd managed to make her favorite pasta dish, and the familiar meal brought a sense of normalcy to their new situation. "Dad?" Lily twirled spaghetti around her fork thoughtfully. "I really like Emily." "Oh?" Daniel took a sip of water, watching his daughter's expressive face. "Yeah, she's super nice and really good at art." Lily paused, her fork hovering mid-twist. "But she seems really sad sometimes, like she's carrying something heavy inside." Daniel marveled at his daughter's perception. "You're pretty observant, sweetheart, just like you taught me to be." Lily grinned. "Is that why we're here? To help make her less sad? We're here to keep her safe," Daniel explained. "But sometimes feeling safe can help people feel less sad, too." After dinner and tucking Lily in, Daniel headed back out for his night shift. The maintenance tunnel entrance had been sealed with a thick metal door, complete with an electronic lock and warning signs. New security cameras blinked their red lights in the darkness. As he completed his first perimeter check, movement on Emily's balcony caught his attention. She stood there in the moonlight, wrapped in a soft cardigan against the evening. "Chill. Everything secure?" she called down softly. "All clear," Daniel responded. "You should try to get some rest." Emily leaned against the stone railing. "Thank you, Daniel. For the first time in years, I actually feel like I might be able to sleep without being afraid." Her voice carried genuine gratitude. "Good night." Daniel watched as she went back inside, the weight of his responsibility settling firmly on his shoulders. His job wasn't just about physical security, it was about helping someone reclaim their peace of mind. As he continued his rounds, he thought about how protecting Emily meant more than just guarding against external threats. It meant creating a space where she could feel truly safe, perhaps for the first time in her life. The night air grew cooler as clouds drifted across the moon. Daniel pulled his jacket closer, alert and watchful. The sealed tunnel was now one less worry, but he knew there would be others. For now, though, both Emily and Lily were safe, and that was enough. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the estate's manicured lawns. Daniel watched from the guest house porch as Emily walked her golden retriever, Max, along the garden path. The dog's tail wagged enthusiastically as Lily ran up to join them, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Can I walk him before school?" Lily called out to Emily, who smiled and handed her the leash. "Of course. Just stay where we can see you," Emily replied, watching as Lily and Max trotted along the flower beds. Daniel approached them, carrying his ever-present radio. "Good morning. Ready for the big event today?" Emily nodded, though her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. Yes, though I still need to gather supplies. Would you mind helping me sort through the art materials? There's quite a bit to organize. That's what I'm here for, Daniel said with an encouraging smile. They made their way to Emily's studio, a bright room filled with canvases and the sharp scent of paint. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating shelves stacked with art supplies. Daniel helped Emily pack brushes, paints, and blank canvases into neat boxes while she checked items off her list. The veterans really enjoy these charity events, Emily said, carefully wrapping some delicate paintbrushes. Art therapy helps them express things they can't always put into words. Daniel nodded, understanding the healing power of creativity. He watched as she methodically organized materials, her movements precise and practiced. The morning passed peacefully as they worked, interrupted only by the occasional bark from Max playing with Lily in the garden below. At lunch, they gathered in the estate's sunny kitchen. The cook had prepared sandwiches, and the informal meal felt comfortable and normal. Lily sat cross-legged in a chair, sharing bits of turkey with Max, who lay hopefully at her feet. As Daniel reached for the water pitcher, one of the younger kitchen staff members, Sarah, bumped into him while carrying dirty plates. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Carr," she apologized, then lowered her voice. "Actually, since I have you here, I thought you should know something I overheard yesterday." Daniel noticed her nervous glance toward the door. "What is it?" "Well, I was cleaning near the security office, and I heard some of the guards talking. One of them seemed really angry about you being here. Said something about you making them look bad and stepping on toes." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "I just thought you should know. The way he was talking, it didn't sound right." Emily, who had overheard, set down her sandwich with trembling hands. "Who was it, Sarah?" I couldn't see who was speaking." "I'm sorry." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on Emily's shoulder. "Thank you for telling us, Sarah. Don't worry about it too much. Some people just don't like change." But even as he spoke the calming words, Daniel's mind was already cataloging the security team members, trying to identify who might harbor such resentment. After lunch, they loaded the art supplies into one of the estate's vehicles and headed to the venue, a sprawling community center with high ceilings and natural light, perfect for an art exhibition. Daniel helped Emily set up easels and arrange supplies while volunteers filtered in to assist. The space slowly filled with people, veterans arriving for the art therapy session, community members interested in the charity aspect, and local art enthusiasts. Daniel maintained his protective watch while trying to stay unobtrusive, letting Emily work her magic with the participants. She moved from easel to easel, offering gentle encouragement and guidance. Her genuine warmth drew people out of their shells, and soon the room hummed with conversation and creativity. Daniel couldn't help but admire how she transformed nervous participants into engaged artists. Then he saw him, a man in a dark jacket standing near the refreshment table, watching Emily with too much intensity. He wasn't participating, wasn't talking to anyone, just observing. When Emily moved to help an elderly veteran with his brushwork, the man shifted position to keep her in view. Daniel began moving through the crowd, maintaining casual appearances while closing the distance. The man must have noticed because he suddenly turned and melted into a cluster of people near the exit. By the time Daniel reached the spot, the mysterious observer was gone. After a thorough check of the surrounding areas yielded nothing, Daniel radioed in the incident to the estate security team. He provided what details he could, approximate height, build, clothing, but knew it wasn't much to go on. As the event wound down and the last participants left with their artwork, Emily approached Daniel. Paint smudges decorated her sleeves, and her face glowed with the satisfaction of a successful session. "Thank you for today," she said softly. "I saw you watching out for everyone. It means so much to know you're always paying attention, always protecting us." Daniel nodded, though his mind wrestled with disturbing possibilities. The way that man had watched Emily spoke of familiarity, of planning. It reminded him too much of how surveillance preceded planned attacks. The original assault in the alley? Had it truly been random? Or had someone orchestrated it, knowing Emily's habits, her routes, her vulnerabilities? "Just doing my job," he replied, helping her pack up the remaining supplies. But the question nagged at him. Who would want to hurt Emily badly enough to plan such an elaborate trap? The charity event took place in a restored Victorian mansion, its grand halls filled with easels and art supplies. Elderly veterans and seniors from the community center gathered around tables, their faces lighting up as Emily entered. Daniel maintained his watchful position near the door, touched by the scene unfolding before him. Emily moved from table to table, her gentle voice carrying across the room as she helped participants with their brushes and colors. An older veteran with trembling hands struggled with his paintbrush until Emily knelt beside him, her hand steadying his grip. "Just like that, Mr. Harrison," she encouraged. "The stroke doesn't need to be perfect. Let's make it your own." The man's face creased into a smile as a recognizable shape emerged on his canvas. Daniel felt a familiar ache in his chest. His late wife Sarah had shown the same patience when teaching art to children at the community center. The parallel struck him deeply. Several hours into the event, Emily stood at the front of the room, her voice clear and steady. "Art has always been my sanctuary," she shared, her eyes scanning the familiar faces. "But true healing comes from connection, from people who bring light into our lives." She paused, looking toward Daniel and Lily, who had joined them after school. "Some angels appear when we least expect them, showing us that family isn't always about blood. It's about who makes us feel safe enough to be ourselves again." Lily beamed from her spot next to an elderly woman she'd been helping with watercolors. Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest at Emily's words, even as his eyes continued scanning the room for any signs of threat. The event wrapped up successfully, with participants proudly displaying their artwork and sharing stories over coffee and cookies. As they loaded the last of the supplies into the car, Daniel noticed Emily's relaxed shoulders and genuine smile, a rare sight that transformed her entire being. Their drive back to the estate started peacefully enough. Daniel sat in the front beside the driver while Emily and Lily chatted about their favorite paintings from the day. About 10 minutes into the journey, Daniel's trained eye caught something in the side mirror, a black sedan, 3 cars back, matching their every turn. "Emily," he said quietly, "keep talking normally." He pressed the radio button on his lapel. "Base, this is DC, possible tail, black sedan, no plates visible, currently on Mason Street." The sedan followed them through 2 more turns before suddenly veering off down a side street. Daniel maintained radio contact until they were safely through the estate gates, providing a detailed description of the vehicle to security. Later that evening, after ensuring Lily was settled with her homework, Daniel found Emily in the estate's greenhouse. Moonlight filtered through the glass panels, casting gentle shadows among the orchids and ferns. Emily stood near her favorite bench, running her fingers along the leaves of a peace lily. "Thank you for today," she said softly as Daniel approached. "I haven't felt this normal in such a long time." Daniel maintained a respectful distance while positioning himself to keep the greenhouse entrance in view. "You did something special for those veterans," reminded me of my wife. She had that same gift for helping people feel seen. Emily turned to face him, her expression open and vulnerable. "When Dad hired all those other security teams, they treated me like I was made of glass. Or worse, like I was just another assignment." She paused, wrapping her arms around herself. "But you and Lily, you make me feel human again. Real. Like maybe I don't have to be afraid all the time." The moonlight caught the unshed tears in her eyes, and Daniel felt his protective instincts surge alongside something deeper, something that made his heart beat a little faster. He recognized the feeling and carefully tucked it away. Now wasn't the time. "Everyone deserves to feel safe in their own life," he said gently. "You've helped create that for Lily too, you know. She hasn't smiled this much since her mom passed." Emily wiped her eyes and managed a small laugh. "She's an amazing kid. You've done a wonderful job with her." They stood in comfortable silence. For a moment, the greenhouse humid and alive around them. Daniel noticed how Emily's shoulders had relaxed, how she seemed more grounded than when he'd first met her in that dark alley. "We should head inside," he said finally, checking his watch. "It's getting late," Emily nodded, gathering herself. "Of course. Good night, Daniel, and thank you for everything." Daniel watched her walk safely to the main house before heading back to the guest cottage. The night air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine. As he walked, he realized the weight in his chest felt lighter than it had in years. The constant grief that had been his companion since Sarah's death had shifted, making room for something that felt surprisingly like hope. Inside the cottage, he found Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, her math homework spread across the coffee table. As he carried her to bed, she stirred slightly. "Dad?" she mumbled. "Did Emily like my painting?" "She loved it, sweetheart," he whispered, tucking her in. Get some sleep. Standing in the quiet living room, Daniel allowed himself to acknowledge the warmth that had been growing in his heart. For the first time since losing Sarah, tomorrow felt like more than just another day to get through. It felt like a promise. The morning sun cast long shadows across the estate's manicured lawns as Daniel walked Emily to her usual breakfast with Richard. The dining room's heavy wooden door stood open, revealing Richard already seated at the head of the massive table, his face buried in documents. "Good morning, Father," Emily said, her voice carrying a hint of warmth that had been growing lately. Richard barely looked up. "Emily, Daniel, please sit." His tone was clipped, businesslike. "We need to discuss some changes to the security protocols." Emily settled into her chair while Daniel took his usual position near the door. A maid quietly served coffee and pastries. "What changes?" Emily asked, stirring honey into her tea. Richard set down his papers and folded his hands. "You'll be remaining on estate grounds indefinitely. No more outside appointments or events." The teacup clattered against its saucer as Emily's hand jerked. "What?" "It's for your safety. Recent events have made it clear." "No." Emily pushed back from the table, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You can't do this." "I can, and I will." Richard's voice hardened. "I'm your father. I'm 28 years old." Emily's face flushed red. "You can't keep me locked up like some fairy tale princess in a tower." Daniel stepped forward, sensing the situation spiraling. "Mr. Hale, perhaps we could discuss alternative security measures that—" "This isn't up for discussion," Richard cut in. "The decision is made." Emily spun toward Daniel, her eyes pleading. "Daniel, please. Tell him this is ridiculous." "Emily," Daniel said carefully, "your father's concerns about safety are valid, but complete isolation might." "Valid?" Emily's voice cracked. "He's trying to control my entire life. Again, just like he always has." Richard stood, his chair toppling backward. "Everything I do is to protect you." "Protect me?" Emily laughed bitterly. "You mean control me, keep me dependent on you." "I was finally starting to feel normal again, to have a life." "A life that almost got you killed," Richard shouted, his face reddening. "If Daniel hadn't been there that night—" "Daniel!" Emily gestured wildly. "Yes, let's talk about Daniel. He keeps me safe without suffocating me. He understands the difference between protection and prison." "Emily," Daniel tried again. "Please, let's all take a moment to—" "No." She slammed her hands on the table. "I won't be locked away again. I'd rather take my chances out there than live as your prisoner." Richard's voice turned to ice. "You're not thinking clearly. This discussion is over." Emily stormed toward the door, tears streaming down her face. "My whole life has been about what you decide. I'm done." After Emily left, silence filled the dining room. Richard straightened his tie, his composure returning. "Daniel, stay a moment." Daniel's instinct was to follow Emily, but he remained. "Sir, there's something you should know." Richard withdrew a document from his briefcase. "A clause in your contract I haven't mentioned." Daniel took the paper, scanning the legal text. His blood ran cold as he read it. If he failed in his duties to protect Emily, guardianship of Lily would transfer to Richard Hale. "This." Daniel's hand shook. "This is impossible." "You can't. I can." Richard's voice was calm. "I protect what's mine, Daniel, by any means necessary. Lily is my daughter." Daniel's voice rose. "You have no right. I have every right. The contract is binding. You signed it. You hid this from me." Daniel stepped forward, fury burning in his chest. "You manipulated. I ensured your complete dedication to Emily's safety." Richard met, his gaze coldly. "Nothing more. By threatening my child?" Daniel's fists clenched. "I trusted you." "Trust is earned through results, Daniel. Keep Emily safe, and Lily remains yours. It's that simple." Daniel wanted to tear the paper to shreds, to grab Richard by his expensive collar. Instead, he forced himself to breathe. "You're wrong about this. About all of it." He turned and left the dining room, his mind racing. He needed to check on Emily, to make sure she was okay. The morning's revelations left him feeling sick. Hours passed as Daniel patrolled the grounds, his thoughts churning between worry for Emily and fear for Lily. As evening approached, he headed to Emily's wing of the mansion for his usual security check. He knocked on her bedroom door. "Emily?" "It's Daniel." No answer. He knocked again, harder. "Emily?" Silence. Daniel tried the handle. It turned easily. "I'm coming in." The room was empty. The bed was unmade, sheets twisted as if someone had left in a hurry. Emily's closet door stood open, clothes scattered across the floor. Her laptop lay open on the desk, screen dark. "Emily?" Daniel called again, moving through the room. His heart began to pound as he took in more details. A knocked-over lamp, a drawer pulled out and rifled through. Then he saw it. A plain white envelope on the desk, his name written across the front in unfamiliar handwriting. With trembling fingers, Daniel opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper. 7 words made his blood run cold. "You saved her once. Save her again." For a moment, Daniel couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then training kicked in. He grabbed his radio. "Security breach. Emily's missing from her room. Possible kidnapping. Lock down the estate immediately." He ran from the room, already dialing Richard's number. Lights began flashing throughout the mansion. Alarms blared. Security teams mobilized across the grounds. As panic spread through the estate, Daniel's mind fixed on one thought. He had to find Emily. Not just for her sake, not just for the contract, but because somewhere in these past weeks, protecting her had become more than just a job. He reached Richard's study just as the man emerged, face ashen. "She's gone," Daniel said, holding out the note, and this time, they took her. The estate erupted into chaos within minutes of discovering Emily's disappearance. Security teams rushed through corridors while red emergency lights flashed silently in every corner of the main building. The usual quiet of the morning shattered as vehicles roared to life and boots thundered across marble floors. Daniel stood in Emily's room, his heart pounding as he examined every detail. Her bed sheets were twisted, showing signs of a quick exit. A cup of tea sat cold on her nightstand, half finished. The ransom note felt heavy in his hands as he read it again. Through the window, he watched as 4 black drones took off from different points around the estate, their cameras scanning every inch of the grounds. Guards with dogs spread out along the perimeter fences, their radios crackling with constant updates. In the security control room, Richard Hale paced back and forth, his usual commanding presence replaced by something Daniel had never seen before: raw fear. His face was ashen, hands trembling as he barked orders into a phone. "I want every camera feed from the last 12 hours, Daniel demanded, pushing past 2 security officers to reach the main monitoring station. "I'll review them myself." The security chief tried to intervene. "Mr. Carr, we have trained personnel for that." "Move," Daniel said, his voice carrying such authority that the chief stepped back. Daniel dropped into the chair and began cycling through footage, his eyes scanning each frame with intense focus. An hour passed as Daniel reviewed camera after camera. Then he saw it, a text message notification lighting up Emily's phone at 2:47 a.m. She read it, grabbed a coat, and hurried outside toward the garden. "There," Daniel pointed. She received a message. "Can we access the estate's communication logs?" A tech specialist pulled up the records. The message had appeared to come from Daniel's security phone. "Emergency with Lily. Meet me in the garden now." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I never sent that message. Someone spoofed my number." Richard leaned in close to the screens, his voice barely a whisper. "An inside job?" "The maintenance tunnel," Daniel said suddenly, standing up. "When did the crew finish sealing it?" The security chief shuffled through some papers. "Work was scheduled to complete this morning, which means it was still accessible last night." Daniel turned to Richard. "They used our own security protocols against us. They knew we'd find the tunnel, knew we'd plan to seal it. They waited for the last possible moment before it was closed." Richard sank into a chair, his face in his hands. "I did this," he said, his voice breaking. "I trapped her here, made her feel like a prisoner." And now, Daniel had never seen the powerful man look so small, but there was no time for sympathy. He needed to check on Lily before he could begin tracking the kidnappers. He found her in their guest house, already dressed for school, her small face pinched with worry as she watched the commotion outside their windows. When he entered, she ran to him. "Something's wrong," she said. "I can feel it." Daniel knelt down and took her hands in his. "Emily's been taken by bad people," he said gently, but honestly. "I have to go find her and bring her back." Lily's eyes filled with tears as she threw her arms around his neck. "Like you found me that time I got lost at the mall?" "Exactly like that," Daniel said, holding her tight. "But I need you to be brave. You'll stay here with Mrs. Peterson from the staff, and I'll have guards right outside. Promise you'll come back?" Her voice trembled. I promise, sweetheart. He kissed her forehead, trying to hide how his own hands shook. Back in the main house, Richard waited in his study, surrounded by estate blueprints and security reports. When Daniel entered, the older man looked up with red-rimmed eyes. I failed her, Richard said quietly. All these years, I thought I was protecting her, but I was just controlling her, suffocating her. He stood and walked to Daniel, his usual imposing presence gone. Please, find my daughter. Bring her home. I know I have no right to ask after what I did with Lily's guardianship, but I'm not doing this for you, Daniel cut him off. I'm doing it for Emily. Daniel spread out the ransom note on Richard's desk, studying every detail. The paper was expensive, the kind used in Richard's own office. The ink showed signs of bleeding, suggesting it was written in a hurry. But most importantly, there was a small mark in the corner, what looked like a partial fingerprint in grease. The maintenance crew, Daniel said, pointing to the mark. This is engine grease. Whoever wrote this works with the estate's vehicles. He turned to Richard. I need complete access to all employee records, especially maintenance staff. And I need to know every property owned by the estate within 50 miles. Richard nodded, already reaching for his phone. Whatever you need, just bring her back. Daniel gathered the note in employee files, his mind already mapping out possible locations and scenarios. As he headed for the door, Richard called out one last time. Daniel, I'm sorry. For everything. Daniel paused but didn't turn around. Save it for Emily, he said, and walked out to begin his search. Daniel stood in Emily's room, his heart pounding as he examined every detail. Her bed sheets were twisted, showing signs of a quick exit. A cup of tea sat cold on her nightstand, half finished. The ransom note felt heavy in his hands as he read it again, searching for any clues he might have missed. He pulled out his phone and replayed the security footage from yesterday. The dark sedan that had followed them appeared on screen, a black Chrysler 300 with tinted windows. Something about it nagged at his memory. He'd seen that car before, perhaps during his delivery routes. Mr. Hale, Daniel called out as Richard paced nearby. I need access to all the footage from the past week. Every camera, every angle. Richard nodded to the security chief, who led Daniel to the control room. Rows of monitors lined the walls, showing live feeds from across the estate. Daniel settled into a chair, his eyes scanning each screen methodically. There, he pointed, 3 days ago, same car. It was watching the maintenance tunnel entrance. The security chief leaned in, squinting. We'll run the plates. No time, Daniel interrupted. I know someone who might help. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. Mike Peterson answered on the third ring. The retired police officer had been a regular stop on Daniel's delivery route, often sharing coffee and stories during late-night deliveries. Mike, I need your help. There's a black Chrysler 300, probably using fake plates. It's been involved in a kidnapping. Any ideas where crews like that might operate? Mike's voice grew serious. That area you used to deliver to, near the old manufacturing district? There's been increased activity there lately. Some of those abandoned buildings have become hangouts for various crews. Daniel grabbed his jacket. Send me the locations. I'm heading there now. Richard stepped forward. I'll send teams. No, Daniel said firmly. Too many people will alert them. I know these streets, these buildings. I delivered to most of them before they shut down. He hurried to his car, checking his phone as Mike's message came through with several addresses. The morning sun was rising as Daniel sped toward the industrial district, his mind racing with memories of every delivery he'd made there. The first two warehouses showed no signs of recent activity. The third had fresh graffiti, but no tire marks. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with each dead end. Then he saw it, the old Riverside manufacturing plant. The chain on the gate had been cut recently, leaving fresh marks on the metal. Daniel parked his car out of sight and approached on foot. His shoes crunched softly on broken concrete as he circled the building. Behind a dumpster, partially hidden under some cardboard, he spotted it. A silk scarf he recognized. Emily had worn it yesterday at the charity event. Moving carefully, Daniel found fresh tire tracks leading to a loading dock. The marks matched the width of a Chrysler 300. He pulled out his phone and texted Richard the location, adding, Found evidence. Going in alone. Send backup, but keep them at distance. Any noise could spook them. Daniel studied the building's exterior. Most windows were boarded up, but he spotted a rusted side door partially hidden behind overgrown bushes. Years of delivering packages had taught him that every building had a weak point, usually the employee entrances that maintenance workers once used. The door's hinges protested softly as Daniel tested them. The lock was old, weakened by rust and weather. He took a deep breath, remembering Lily's tight hug before he left, remembering Emily's trust in him, remembering his promise to keep her safe. With careful pressure, Daniel forced the door open just enough to slip inside. Darkness swallowed him as he entered the abandoned building, his heart thundering in his chest. Inside the dark manufacturing plant, Daniel moved with calculated steps. His shoes made no sound on the concrete floor as he navigated through a maze of abandoned equipment. Dust particles danced in the thin beams of light, filtering through broken windows high above. The musty air filled his lungs as he controlled his breathing, straining to hear any movement ahead. Voices echoed from deeper. In the building, Daniel crouched behind a rusted conveyor belt, his heart hammering against his ribs. He could make out at least two distinct male voices, their words becoming clearer as he inched closer. "The old man will pay whatever we ask," one voice said. "His precious daughter is worth billions to him." Daniel's jaw clenched. He recognized that voice. It belonged to one of Emily's original attackers from the alley. Keeping low, he peered around a large metal press. About 30 feet ahead, in a cleared area illuminated by portable work lights, he saw Emily. She sat tied to a metal chair, her head bowed. Her usually neat blonde hair was disheveled, and her clothes were dirty. Two men stood near her, one lounging against a support column while the other paced slowly back and forth. Daniel's fingers curled into fists when he recognized them both from that night in the alley. "We should have done this from the start," the pacing man said. "Forget about scaring her back home. Direct blackmail is cleaner." Emily lifted her head slightly, and Daniel could see tear tracks on her cheeks, but there was defiance in her posture, even bound to the chair. She remained silent, watching her captors with steady eyes. Daniel surveyed his surroundings. He needed to take them down quickly and quietly before any other kidnappers returned. His gaze fell on a length of rusty pipe lying nearby. Moving with excruciating slowness, he picked it up, testing its weight. The lounging kidnapper pushed off from the column. "I'm getting coffee." "Watch her." "Perfect." Daniel waited until the man walked past his position, completely unaware of the danger. In one fluid motion, Daniel rose up behind him and brought the pipe down hard across his shoulders. The kidnapper crumpled without a sound. "Hey Jim, you forget something?" the pacing man called out, his back still turned. Daniel dragged the unconscious man behind the press, then moved forward. But a loose piece of metal skittered across the floor under his foot. The second kidnapper whirled around, eyes widening as he spotted Daniel. "You!" he snarled, reaching for something in his jacket. Daniel launched himself forward, tackling the man before he could draw what was likely a weapon. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs. The kidnapper was stronger than he looked, landing a solid punch to Daniel's ribs that drove the air from his lungs. "Daniel!" Emily cried out, struggling against her bonds. The fear in her voice pierced through Daniel's pain. He couldn't fail her. Not now. Not ever. Daniel drove his elbow into his opponent's solar plexus, following with a sharp strike to the jaw. The kidnapper's head snapped back against the concrete floor, stunning him. Daniel scrambled to his feet and rushed to Emily. "Hold still," he whispered, working at the ropes binding her wrists. "I'm getting you out of here." "Daniel, I knew you'd come," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "But there are more. Of them." As if on cue, shouts erupted from somewhere in the building. Heavy footsteps pounded on metal stairs, reinforcements responding to the sounds of struggle. "Can you run?" Daniel asked, finally freeing her hands. Emily nodded, rubbing her wrists. "Yes. Stay close to me." Daniel helped her up, keeping his body between her and the direction of the approaching footsteps. "We need to move. Now." They darted between massive pieces of equipment, Daniel leading them away from the voices. The plant was a labyrinth of shadows and rust, every corner potentially hiding danger. Emily's breathing came in sharp gasps behind him, but she kept pace. A bullet pinged off metal nearby. Emily stifled a scream. Daniel pulled her behind a large industrial press, wrapping his arms around her protectively as more shots echoed through the building. "Found them!" a voice shouted. "They're heading for the west side." Daniel pressed a finger to his lips, signaling Emily to stay quiet. Footsteps approached their position. some fast, others moving more cautiously. He could make out at least 3 distinct sets. Emily trembled against him, but her eyes were determined when they met his. They crouched in tense silence as the footsteps drew nearer. Daniel's muscles coiled, ready to fight or run. A beam from a flashlight swept past their hiding spot, missing them by inches. The footsteps grew closer still. Emily gripped his arm tightly. Daniel held his breath, mind racing through their options as their hunters closed in. "The old man will pay whatever we ask," one voice said. "His precious daughter is worth billions to him." Daniel pressed his back against a concrete pillar, his mind racing. Through gaps in the machinery, he could see Emily. She sat bound to a metal chair, her head bowed but breathing steadily. 2 men paced nearby, the same ones who had attacked her in the alley. Their faces were partially hidden in shadow, but Daniel recognized their builds and movements. "When do we make the call?" the second kidnapper asked, checking his phone. "Soon as the boss gives the word. He wants to make sure the security chief held up his end." Daniel's jaw clenched. The corrupt security chief. It all made sense now. The dismissed concerns, the delayed response to the tunnel discovery, the inside information. He pushed the anger aside, focusing instead on the row of massive pipes stacked against the far wall. They were held in place by rusted brackets, barely secure after years of neglect. Emily lifted her head slightly, and even in the dim light, Daniel could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't broken, she was waiting. Just like in the alley, her spirit remained undefeated. Daniel had to act fast before more kidnappers arrived. He crept toward the pipes, staying low behind equipment. Every step was measured, careful not to disturb the years of dust and debris. The kidnappers continued their conversation, unaware of his presence. When he reached the pipes, Daniel tested one bracket quietly. It was loose, ready to give way with enough force. "I'm going to check the perimeter," one kidnapper announced. "Radio, if anything changes." Daniel waited until the footsteps faded. Only one guard remained with Emily. The timing had to be perfect. He braced himself against the wall and pushed hard against the pipes. The bracket groaned, then snapped with a sharp crack. The pipes crashed down with a thunderous boom that echoed through the empty building. Metal rolled across concrete, creating a cacophony of noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The remaining kidnapper spun around, gun drawn. "What the hell?" he shouted, moving toward the sound. Daniel was already moving. While the kidnapper investigated the fallen pipes, he darted to Emily. Her eyes widened in recognition as he quickly worked to untie her bonds. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice rough but relieved. "I've got you," he murmured, freeing her. "Hands." "Can you walk?" She nodded, rubbing her wrists. Daniel helped her stand, supporting her as her legs steadied. The kidnapper was still distracted, calling out to his partner on the radio. Daniel guided Emily behind a large press machine, then toward a side corridor he'd noticed earlier. "Hey!" The shout came from behind them. The kidnapper had spotted their movement. "Run!" Daniel urged, keeping himself between Emily and any potential gunfire. They raced through the dark corridor, Daniel leading the way with one hand on Emily's arm. Their footsteps echoed off the walls, but he could hear multiple sets of boots behind them now. The second kidnapper had returned. "There's a loading dock ahead," Daniel panted. "Keep going." Emily stumbled slightly but caught herself, pushing forward with renewed energy. They burst through a set of double doors onto a concrete loading ramp. The cool night air hit their faces, and for a moment, Daniel thought they were clear. Suddenly, bright lights flooded the area. Daniel instinctively pulled Emily close, shielding her eyes from the glare. But instead of more kidnappers, he heard familiar voices shouting commands. Richard's security team had arrived, their vehicles surrounding the loading dock with precision. "Drop your weapons!" The order rang out as armed security personnel emerged from behind vehicles. The kidnappers skidded to a stop in the doorway behind Daniel and Emily. For a tense moment, nobody moved. Daniel could feel Emily trembling against him, her fingers gripping his jacket. Then the kidnappers turned and fled back into the darkness of the building. Several security team members pursued them while others secured the perimeter. Daniel kept hold of Emily as she sagged in relief, her adrenaline fading. He guided her down the loading ramp steps, where paramedics were already approaching with equipment. "Emily!" Richard's voice cracked with emotion as he rushed forward from one of the vehicles. Emily looked up at her. Father's approach. The paramedics had seated her on the back of an ambulance, checking her vital signs. Years of tension seemed to hang in the air between father and daughter. "I'm sorry." Richard choked out, his usual commanding presence crumbling. "I'm so sorry for everything." Emily's face softened. "Dad," she said quietly, reaching out her hand. Richard took it, then pulled her into a gentle hug, mindful of her injuries. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "I've been so wrong, trying to control everything. I couldn't bear to lose you like I lost your mother." "I know," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "I forgive you, Dad. I forgive you." Daniel stepped back, giving them privacy. His body ached from the fight, and emotional exhaustion washed over him in waves. But watching father and daughter begin to heal their relationship made it all worthwhile. He observed quietly as the paramedics continued their work, as security teams reported their sweeps of the building. As Emily and Richard spoke in soft voices, the night air grew cooler, and distant sirens announced the approach of police vehicles. Daniel leaned against one of the security cars, allowing himself to finally feel the full weight of what had just occurred. Emily was safe. The truth about the corrupt security chief would come out. And somehow, in saving Emily's life again, he had helped save a family too. "Freeze!" Richard's security team shouted, their weapons drawn as bright lights flooded the loading dock. The kidnappers scattered like rats, disappearing into the shadows of the night. Emily's legs gave out, and Daniel caught her before she could fall. "I've got you," he whispered, holding her steady. "You're safe now." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she clung to his jacket. The adrenaline that had kept her going began to fade, replaced by exhaustion and relief. Security teams swept the area while paramedics rushed forward with a blanket and medical supplies. "Daniel," she breathed, her voice shaking. "You came for me." "Of course I did." He helped her sit on the back of the ambulance while paramedics checked her vital signs. Tires screeched against pavement as another vehicle arrived. Richard burst out before it fully stopped, his face pale with worry. "Emily?" He rushed to his daughter, stopping short when he saw her condition. The usually composed businessman's hands trembled as he reached for her. "Dad?" Emily said softly, allowing him to take her hand. "I'm so sorry." Richard's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry for everything." He wrapped his arms around her carefully, mindful of her injuries. Emily leaned into his embrace, accepting his comfort for the first time in years. Daniel stepped back, giving them space. He watched as paramedics tended to Emily's bruised wrists and scratches. His own heart was still racing from the rescue, but seeing her safe made everything worth it. The drive back to the estate felt surreal. Daniel rode in a separate vehicle, his mind replaying the events of the night. By the time they arrived, dawn was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and purples. "Daddy!" Lily's voice rang out across the driveway. She sprinted toward him, her school backpack still on, having obviously refused to leave for class until he returned. Daniel caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet. "Hey, sweetheart." He held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I was so worried," she mumbled into his shoulder. "But I knew you'd save Emily. You always make things better." "I'm okay, princess." "Everything's okay now." He set her down gently, and she immediately turned to Emily, who was being helped inside by medical staff. "Emily," Lily called out, rushing over but stopping short, unsure if she should hug her. "Are you hurt?" Emily managed a warm smile despite her exhaustion. "I'm all right, Lily, just a little tired and sore. I made you something." Lily dug through her backpack and pulled out a slightly crumpled piece of paper. "It's to help you feel better." Emily carefully took the drawing. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall with brown hair, one medium with blonde hair, and one small with pigtails. They stood in front of what appeared to be the estate, with a bright sun shining overhead. Written in careful child's handwriting were the words, "Get well soon, Emily." "Oh, Lily." Emily's eyes welled up with tears. "This is beautiful. Thank you." She carefully folded the drawing and held it close to her heart. "Miss Hale, we should get you inside to rest," one of the medical staff suggested gently. As Emily was led away, Richard approached Daniel. His usual commanding presence was subdued, replaced by something more human. "My office, please," he said quietly. Inside the wood-paneled room, Richard closed the door and walked to his desk. He opened a drawer and removed the original security contract, the one with the cruel clause about Lily's guardianship. Without a word, he tore it in half, then quarters, then eighths. "I was wrong," Richard said, his voice heavy with regret. "I've been wrong about so many things." He dropped the torn pieces into his wastepaper basket. I thought I could control everything, everyone. I believed that would keep Emily safe. He turned to face Daniel. But you protected her with compassion, not force. You showed me what real strength looks like. Mr. Hale, Daniel started, but Richard held up his hand. I've spent years trying to cage Emily to keep her safe, but all I did was push her away. I let my fear poison our relationship. He sank into his chair, suddenly looking every bit his age. I owe you an apology, Daniel. That contract was cruel and manipulative. I'm ashamed I even considered using your daughter as leverage. Thank you, Daniel said simply. Sometimes the hardest conversations required the fewest words. Later that evening, after Lily was tucked into bed with extra hugs and reassurance, Daniel made his way to Emily's room. He knocked softly on the doorframe. "Come in," she called. Emily sat in a comfortable armchair by the window, wrapped in a soft blanket. Her injuries had been properly treated, mostly bruises and minor cuts, but the emotional weight of the ordeal still showed in her eyes. "How are you holding up?" Daniel asked, taking a seat across from her. "Better than I expected." She gazed out at the darkening sky. "You know, when they first grabbed me, I was terrified. But then I remembered how you found me that first night in the alley, and I knew you'd find me again. I'll always come for you," Daniel said softly. Emily turned to face him, her eyes glistening. "You've changed everything, Daniel. Before you came into our lives, I was just existing, trapped between my father's control and my own fears. But now—" She took a deep breath. "Now I feel stronger. Like I can finally start building the life I want, instead of hiding from it." "What kind of life is that?" he asked gently. "One without fear." She smiled, small but genuine. "One where I can continue my art therapy work, make my own choices, maybe even repair things with my father. And—" She hesitated, then met his eyes. "One where you and Lily are part of it. If you want to be." Daniel reached across and took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Emily, as long as you want us in your life, we'll be here. You have my word." A peaceful silence fell between them, filled with understanding and possibility. Outside, crickets began their evening song, and the last rays of sunlight painted the room in warm golden hues. In that moment, both Daniel and Emily knew that while the day's crisis had ended, something new and hopeful was just beginning. The following days brought a gradual calm to the Hale estate, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Workers replaced old security cameras with newer models, and teams patched every possible entry point. Daniel watched from the guest house porch as they sealed the maintenance tunnel permanently with thick concrete. The corrupt security chief's office stood empty, his personal items packed in boxes. Richard had fired him immediately after discovering his connection to the kidnappers. The man had left without a word, escorted off the property by two stern-faced guards. Emily spent the first day after her rescue resting in her room, but by the second morning, she was ready to venture out. Daniel found her standing uncertainly at her bedroom door. "Would you walk with me?" she asked, wrapping her arms around herself. "Just around the garden?" "Of course." Daniel matched her slow pace as they made their way down the marble staircase. Small steps are still steps forward. The morning air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and blooming roses. Emily's shoulders relaxed slightly as they followed the winding garden path. "I keep thinking about how different things could have turned out," she admitted, "if you hadn't been there that first night in the alley." "But I was," Daniel said gently, "and I'm here now." They passed a bed of yellow daffodils, Emily's favorite flowers. She paused to touch one delicate petal. "I used to hide in this garden when I was little," she said, "whenever Dad's rules felt too strict. Now I understand he was trying to protect me, but protection shouldn't feel like a cage," Daniel finished. Emily nodded. "Exactly." Over the next few days, their walks became longer. Emily's steps grew more confident as they explored the grounds. Sometimes they talked about serious things, her fears, her hopes, her complicated relationship with her father. Other times they shared comfortable silence, broken only by birdsong and distant lawnmowers. One afternoon, as they passed the estate's small art studio, Emily stopped. Her hand rested on the doorknob, but she didn't turn it. "You know," Daniel said carefully, "your students probably miss you. Do you think I'm ready?" Uncertainty clouded her face. "To teach again?" "I think you're stronger than you realize." Daniel smiled. "And I know some young artists who would love to learn from you." Right on cue, Lily came bouncing down the path from the guest house, her backpack full of art supplies. "Emily, Can we paint today? Please? Emily's face brightened. I'd love that. Soon the art studio echoed with Lily's giggles as Emily showed her how to blend watercolors. Daniel watched from the doorway as they bent their heads together over the paper, Emily's patient voice explaining techniques while Lily soaked up every word. These impromptu art sessions became a daily ritual. Richard would sometimes pause outside the studio window, watching silently as his daughter came back to life through her teaching. The tight lines around his mouth softened when he saw Emily laughing at Lily's jokes or praising her progress. One evening, Richard caught Daniel as he was by, finishing his security rounds. "I've been wrong about many things," he said, his usual commanding tone replaced by something humbler. "The way I tried to control Emily, I thought I was protecting her, but I was suffocating her." Daniel listened quietly, noting how Richard's shoulders slumped slightly under the weight of his admission. "You've shown me there's a better way," Richard continued. "She needs freedom to grow, not walls to hide behind." The following week, Emily announced she wanted to resume her community art classes. She stood straighter as she told her father, ready to defend her decision, but Richard simply nodded. "Whatever you need," he said softly. "I trust your judgment." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she hugged him, the first real embrace they'd shared in years. Later that afternoon, Emily found Daniel watching Lily practice her newest painting technique on the guest house porch. She twisted her hands nervously before speaking. "The charity class starts next Tuesday," she said. Would you come? Not as security, just as—" She paused, searching for the right words. "As my friend?" Daniel looked at her, really looked at her. The fear that had shadowed her eyes when they first met was fading, replaced by a quiet strength. She stood taller now, more sure of herself, more free. "I'd be honored," he said simply. Emily's smile bloomed like the garden's daffodils in spring sunshine. She sat down beside Lily, picking up a spare paintbrush. "Now, let's see if we can add some clouds to that sky of yours." Golden sunlight poured through the senior center's expansive windows, casting dancing shadows across the polished wooden floor as Emily carefully arranged art supplies on the long rectangular tables. Her movements held a newfound confidence, a graceful certainty that hadn't been there just weeks before. Each brush was placed with deliberate care, every tube of paint positioned for easy access. Daniel stood near the entrance, his shoulder leaning against the doorframe as he watched her transformation with quiet amazement. Gone was the hesitant, fearful woman he'd first met. In her place was someone who moved with purpose and joy. Lily bounced between the tables like a small whirlwind of helpfulness, her ponytail swinging as she distributed paper towels at each station. She chatted easily with the early arrivals, her natural warmth drawing smiles from faces weathered by decades of living. Daniel marveled at how quickly his daughter had adapted to this new world, how she seemed to bloom in the gentle atmosphere Emily created. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet some very special people," Emily announced as the last of the seniors settled into their familiar seats around the tables. Her voice carried a melodic warmth that Daniel had never heard in those first tense weeks at the estate. The nervous edge that used to creep into her tone was completely gone, replaced by genuine affection and confidence. "This is Daniel Carr and his daughter Lily. They've become—" She paused, her eyes finding Daniel's across the room, and in that moment, something passed between them that needed no words. The silence stretched just long enough for everyone to feel the weight of what she was about to say. "They've become family to me." The room erupted in a chorus of welcoming murmurs and approving nods. These people had watched Emily struggle, had seen her withdraw after her attacks, and now they witnessed her emergence like flowers after a long winter. The love in their faces was unmistakable. A distinguished silver-haired veteran in a well-worn wheelchair rolled forward with practiced ease, his weathered hands gripping the wheels with surprising strength. Despite his age, his posture remained military straight, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence of a man who'd seen much but lost none of his spirit. He extended a callous hand toward Daniel with the formality of old-school manners. "Name's Frank Sullivan, Marine Corps, retired," he said with crisp pronunciation. "Been coming to Miss Emily's classes for 2 years now, ever since my daughter insisted I needed something to do with my time besides complain about the news." His grip was remarkably firm despite his advanced years, and his smile held genuine warmth. "Good to finally meet the man who helped bring our girl back to us. She's told us quite a bit about you and your little one." Daniel felt heat rise in his cheeks as he shook the veteran's hand. "Emily did that all on her own, sir. She's stronger than she knows." "Not from what we hear." interjected a petite woman with silver curls and kind blue eyes magnified by wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a cheerful blue cardigan decorated with an impressive collection of paint spots and smudges that spoke to her enthusiasm for the classes. Her voice carried the gentle authority of a retired teacher. "I'm Margaret, and honey, she tells us you showed her what real strength looks like. There's a difference between surviving and living, and you helped her remember how to do the second one." Emily's cheeks flushed a delicate pink as she busied herself with rearranging paintbrushes that were already perfectly organized. "All right, everyone, let's focus on today's project before you embarrass me into hiding under these tables." Her laugh was light and musical. "We're painting landscapes from memory today. Think about a place that made you feel peaceful, somewhere that holds good memories." As the class progressed into its familiar rhythm, Daniel found himself mesmerized by Emily's transformation. She moved from table to table with the grace of a dancer, her flowing skirt swishing softly against her legs. At each station, she knelt beside the seated participants, bringing herself to their eye level with natural respect. Her touch was gentle as she guided shaky hands, her voice encouraging as she coaxed hidden artists from behind walls of self-doubt. Lily had claimed a spot at a corner table between two elderly ladies who treated her like a beloved granddaughter, Mrs. Chen. A tiny woman with ink-black hair pulled into a neat bun praised Lily's natural eye for color in accented English. Beside her, Dorothy, whose white hair was perfectly styled despite her 92 years, marveled at Lily's fearless brushstrokes and bold choices. "Look at this child's talent!" Dorothy exclaimed, adjusting her bifocals for a better view of Lily's emerging landscape. "She paints like she's not afraid of making mistakes. That's the secret to good art, you know." "She's different now," Frank said quietly to Daniel, rolling his chair closer to where he stood observing. The veteran's weathered hands were surprisingly gentle as he worked blue paint across his canvas, creating what appeared to be an ocean scene. After what happened to her before, and this isn't the first time she's been hurt, you know, she was like a bird with broken wings, kept trying to fly but couldn't trust the air anymore. Frank paused in his painting, his eyes following Emily as she helped an elderly man mix the perfect shade of green for his memory of Ireland. But look at her now. Wings are healed, and she's soaring again. That takes someone special to help with that kind of healing. Daniel watched as Emily threw her head back, laughing at something one of her students had whispered about their painting. The sound was pure and unguarded, bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her that had been locked away for far too long. It was nothing like the nervous, careful laughs he'd heard during those first tense weeks when every sound seemed calculated for safety. "She brings light wherever she goes," Margaret added softly, dabbing yellow paint onto her canvas to create what looked like a sunny meadow. Even when she was struggling the most, she never let it dim her care for others. But now she's glowing from the inside out. After the class ended and easels were folded away, several seniors approached Daniel with the slow but determined steps of people who had something important to say. They shared stories about Emily's kindness that painted a picture more beautiful than any landscape on canvas. How she remembered everyone's grandchildren's names and always asked after their health. How she brought extra supplies for those on fixed incomes who couldn't afford their own materials. How she'd spent her own money to arrange transportation for members who had trouble getting to the center. Each story revealed new layers of the woman Daniel had come to admire. Someone whose compassion ran deeper than any wound, whose resilience had been tested but never broken, whose genuine nature shone through every interaction. As they helped stack chairs and wipe down tables, Emily suggested they visit Sterling Park, a quiet green space just a few blocks away. "It's one of my favorite places in the city," she explained, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Peaceful, away from all the noise and rush." The late afternoon sun stretched their shadows long across the park's emerald grass as they walked along the winding path. Ancient oak trees provided patches of cool shade, their branches creating a natural canopy overhead. Lily spotted the playground immediately and ran ahead with the boundless energy of childhood, her delighted squeals echoing across the open space as she claimed the swings. Emily led Daniel to a weathered wooden bench, positioned perfectly to overlook a small pond where ducks glided serenely across the mirror-like surface. She settled beside him, leaving just enough space between them to feel appropriate while still close enough that he caught the faint scent of her floral perfume. Her fingers twisted together in her lap, a gesture he'd learned to recognize as nervous energy building before she shared something important. The setting created an intimate bubble around them, children's laughter from the distant Playground, the gentle lapping of water against the pond's edge, birds calling softly from the surrounding trees. It was the kind of peaceful moment that invited honest conversation. "I need to tell you something," Emily began, her voice soft but steady, carrying the weight of words she'd been practicing in her mind. "When those men attacked me in the alley that night, I thought I'd never feel safe again. Not just physically, but in my own skin, in my own life." She turned to face him fully, her green eyes serious and direct. "But then you showed up, and you didn't just save me from them, you showed me what real protection looks like." She paused, watching a mother duck guide her ducklings across the pond in a perfect line, their tiny bodies creating small wakes in the still water. "It's not about control or fear or building walls so high that nothing can touch you," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "It's about giving someone the strength and safety to stand on their own, to rebuild what was broken, to trust again." Daniel listened intently, feeling the profound weight of her words settle into his chest. In the distance, Lily's laughter rang out as she discovered how high she could swing, her joy infectious even from across the park. "Your compassion," Emily continued, her hands finally stilling as she found her courage. "The way you care for Lily with such gentle strength, how you stand up to my father without cruelty or malice, how you see me as a complete person and not just someone to guard or protect or manage, it's changed everything inside me." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears of gratitude rather than sorrow. "You've helped me believe in people again. You've shown me that there are still good men in this world who protect without possessing, who care without controlling." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves above them, sending a few early autumn leaves spiraling down to land at their feet. Daniel watched Lily pump her legs on the swing set, her determination to go higher, making him smile despite the serious turn of their conversation. "After Sarah died," he said slowly, speaking his late wife's name aloud for the first time in years without feeling like the words might break him, "I thought I had to be everything for Lily. Perfect father, flawless provider, unbreakable protector. I was so focused on being strong enough for both of us that I forgot how to be human, how to be vulnerable, how to let anyone else care about us." He met Emily's gaze, finding understanding there that he'd never expected to discover. "Being around you, watching you face your fears with such incredible grace and determination, it's helped me remember that strength isn't about never breaking or never needing help. It's about how you choose to put yourself back together and who you let stand beside you while you do it." Emily's hand found his, her touch warm and steady and completely free of hesitation. "You've given me my life back, Daniel, not by fighting my battles or making my decisions, but by showing me that I'm worth fighting for, that I deserve to feel safe and valued and cared for." They sat in comfortable silence, their joined hands resting on the bench between them as they watched Lily's tireless energy propel her swing higher and higher. The setting sun painted the sky in soft watercolor washes of pink and purple and gold, creating the kind of gentle ending that felt more like a beautiful beginning. "I don't want to go back to just being your guard," Daniel said finally, the words emerging with quiet certainty. "These past weeks, being with you and Lily, seeing how we fit together as something more than just protector and protected, it's felt like finding something I didn't even know I was missing." Emily squeezed his hand, her smile radiant in the golden light. "Then don't. Be my partner instead. Be the person who walks beside me through whatever comes next, not behind me watching for danger." Lily's voice suddenly called out from the playground, bright with excitement. "Daddy, Emily, come watch me do my super high swing. I'm practically flying." They stood together, still holding hands, and walked toward her with unhurried steps. Each footfall felt like moving forward into something new and hopeful, something neither of them had dared to imagine just weeks before. The late afternoon light wrapped around them like a warm embrace as they watched Lily swing with abandon, her infectious laughter mixing with theirs in the peaceful park air. In that perfect moment, Daniel felt the last protective walls around his heart begin to soften and dissolve, making room for the possibility of a future filled with love and partnership, and the kind of family that forms not from blood, but from choice and care and mutual healing. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the Hale Estate's manicured lawn as staff members bustled about with purposeful energy, arranging elegant, white chairs in perfect rows and hanging soft white lights that would twinkle like stars in the gathering dusk. The courtyard had been transformed into something magical, with delicate paper lanterns swaying gently from the oak trees and fresh flower arrangements dotting every surface. Daniel watched from the guest house window, still amazed at how much had changed in such a short time. The same estate that had once felt cold and imposing now radiated warmth and life. He straightened his tie, a thoughtful gift from Emily in rich navy blue that she'd said brought out his eyes, and smiled as Lily twirled in her new blue dress, the fabric spinning like a flower petal around her small frame. "You look absolutely beautiful, sweetheart," he said, his heart swelling with pride as he watched his daughter's face glow with happiness. "Emily helped me pick it out at that fancy store downtown," Lily beamed, smoothing the soft fabric with careful hands. The dress had tiny silver buttons, shaped like stars, and she'd insisted on wearing her mother's small pearl bracelet to complete the outfit. "Do you think there'll be cake? I saw Mrs. Henderson carrying something big and white toward the kitchen earlier." Daniel chuckled, remembering how nervous he'd been about fitting into this world of crystal and fine china. Now, it felt like home. "I saw the kitchen staff bringing in something that looked suspiciously like dessert, but you'll have to wait and see what it is." The celebration wasn't his idea. He'd actually tried to talk Richard out of it, feeling uncomfortable being the center of attention. But the older man had insisted, with unusual gentleness, saying some things deserve to be acknowledged properly, that heroes shouldn't hide in shadows. As Daniel and Lily walked toward the courtyard, the early evening light painted the sky in soft brushstrokes of pink and gold, making everything look like a watercolor painting. The estate staff had transformed the space into an intimate gathering area that felt both elegant and welcoming. White chairs with cream-colored cushions faced a small wooden podium decorated with autumn leaves and chrysanthemums. Tables draped in ivory linens held an array of refreshments arranged along the garden wall. Everything from delicate finger sandwiches to chocolate-dipped strawberries that made Lily's eyes widen with delight. Flowers from the greenhouse filled crystal vases throughout the space, their sweet, honeyed scent mixing with the crisp autumn air and the faint smell of wood smoke from somewhere in the distance. Emily stood near the entrance like a gracious hostess, wearing a sage green dress that made her eyes shine like emeralds and her auburn hair glow in the golden light. When she spotted them approaching, her face lit up with the kind of genuine joy that had become her trademark since the dark days had passed. "There you are." She hugged Lily first, breathing in the little girl's sunshine scent, then squeezed Daniel's hand with fingers that were warm and steady. "Dad's about to start, and I think you're going to be surprised by what he has to say." Richard Hale stepped up to the simple wooden podium, looking remarkably different than the stern, imposing man Daniel had first encountered in his study months ago. The months of healing and rebuilding relationships had softened his sharp edges, replaced the rigid lines around his eyes with something gentler. His expensive suit was the same, but his posture was more relaxed, more human. He cleared his throat and addressed the small but meaningful crowd of estate staff members, local veterans who'd become part of Emily's extended family, and seniors from her art classes who'd grown to love both teacher and student. "When Daniel Carr first came into our lives," Richard began, his voice carrying clear notes of regret and deep gratitude, "I saw him as nothing more than a means to an end, someone to protect my daughter from the dangers I couldn't know. Control." He paused, his eyes finding Daniel's across the gathering. "I was completely and utterly wrong. Daniel showed us all what real protection actually means. It's not about building walls or controlling every variable. It's about courage in the face of fear, compassion when it's difficult to give, and helping others find their own strength instead of making them dependent on yours." Emily slipped her hand into Daniel's as her father continued, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that felt as natural as breathing. "That's why today I'm announcing the establishment of the Carr Family Scholarship Program." Richard's announcement drew surprised murmurs and a few gasps from the audience. This program will provide educational opportunities, artistic supplies, and vocational training for veterans, seniors, and single parents in our community. Because sometimes all people really need is someone who believes in them and gives them a chance to prove what they're capable of. Just like Daniel gave Emily that night in the alley when he chose to stop instead of walking by. Heartfelt applause filled the courtyard, mixing with the sound of the fountain and the distant call of birds settling in for the evening. Daniel felt his chest tighten with emotion as several of Emily's elderly art students dabbed at their eyes with delicate handkerchiefs. One veteran in particular, a silver-haired man named Frank, who'd been attending Emily's art therapy classes since they resumed and had become like a grandfather figure to Lily, wheeled his chair forward to shake Daniel's hand with a grip that spoke of old strength and new hope. "You did a lot more than just save her life that night, son," the older man said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "You helped her find her spark again, her purpose. We all see it burning bright now. She's not just teaching us to paint, she's teaching us to live again." After the announcement, as guests mingled and shared refreshments, under the twinkling lights, Emily touched Daniel's arm with gentle fingers. "Would you and Lily like to walk through the gardens with me? The sunset's absolutely beautiful from the Rose Terrace tonight, and I want to show you something special." They strolled together along the winding gravel path, past late-blooming roses in shades of coral and cream, ornamental grasses swaying like dancers in the evening breeze, and maple trees beginning to turn brilliant shades of red and orange. The air was crisp but not cold, perfect for walking and talking softly. Lily skipped ahead of them, her patent leather shoes clicking on the stones, then stopped suddenly near a bench carved with delicate ivy patterns, turning back with barely contained excitement. "Oh, I almost forgot the most important thing." She pulled a carefully folded paper from her dress pocket, smoothing it with the reverence of someone handling treasure before holding it out to Emily with shy pride. "I made this for you during art time yesterday. Mrs. Henderson helped me find the special colors." Emily unfolded the drawing with careful hands, and her breath caught in her throat. On the paper, rendered in Lily's careful but confident hand, were 3 figures holding hands beneath a rainbow. Daniel in his blue shirt, Emily in green, and Lily herself in her favorite purple. They were standing in front of what looked like the Hale Mansion, but it had flowers growing all around it and hearts floating in the sky above. Written across the top in rainbow colors that had been applied with painstaking care were the words, "Our New Beginning Family." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she knelt to Lily's level, pulling the little girl into a tight embrace that spoke of love found and held safe. "This is the most beautiful, most precious gift I've ever received," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion and wonder. "I'm going to frame it and put it in my studio so I can look at it every single day." When she stood, Emily's eyes met Daniel's, and in them he saw all the words they hadn't yet spoken aloud. Hope for the future, trust built through shared trials, and the sweet possibility of something deeper and more lasting growing between them, like flowers in well-tended soil. The setting sun painted everything in soft gold light, making the moment feel almost magical, like something from one of Lily's fairy tale books. Daniel looked down at Lily, who had taken both their hands in her small ones, creating the same beautiful image she'd drawn with such care. He thought about that night in the alley that seemed like a lifetime ago, how one decision to stop and help instead of walking away had changed everything, not just for Emily, but for all of them, creating ripples of healing and hope that had spread farther than he could have ever imagined. The evening breeze carried the distant sound of laughter from the courtyard, mixed with the gentle fountain burbling in the garden and the soft rustle of leaves preparing for autumn's full arrival. Here, in this peaceful moment, surrounded by beauty and love, Daniel felt the last stubborn pieces of his carefully guarded heart beginning to heal. He saw the same transformation in Emily, too, the way she stood taller now with confidence restored, smiled more freely without fear shadowing her eyes, and looked toward the future with anticipation instead of dread. Richard had found his way back to being a father rather than a fortress, learning that love given freely was stronger than control imposed through fear. Emily had reclaimed her independence and rediscovered her joy, her art flowing with new passion and purpose. Lily had gained an extended family who adored her completely, giving her the security and love every child deserved. And Daniel had discovered that sometimes the bravest thing isn't running into danger to save someone else. It's opening your heart wide enough to let love in again, trusting that this time it would stay. As the sun dipped lower behind the oak trees, casting long purple shadows across the garden path and turning the sky into a canvas of rose and lavender, Lily's grip on their hands tightened with contentment. Emily leaned closer to Daniel, her presence warm and perfectly right beside him. Together, they watched the first stars appear in the deepening sky, 3 hearts beating in harmony as they stood at the threshold of their new beginning, ready to write the next chapter of their story together. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Daniel Carr, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.